Good afternoon. This is the meeting on July 13th, 2010. We'll start with the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Chris Nunn, assistant pastor at Christ Community Church. And Chris, after you do the prayer, can you lead us in invocation? Can you lead us in invocation after you do the prayer?
Sure. All right, let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we come to you this afternoon, a grateful people. Lord, we are grateful for all you have provided, for all that you've given unto us, and Lord, for the stewardship that you've placed us all over. And Lord, we come to you interceding on behalf of the board this afternoon, Lord, that you would give them wisdom and discernment as they seek to govern us in the area of the business of the IID. Lord, certainly there are so many people's livelihoods that are attached to this great organization here in our valley, Lord, that people are dependent upon them for a paycheck. And Lord, we all, in one way or another, depend upon them for power or for water. And so, Lord, we pray, God, that you, the divine source of all wisdom and discernment, would grant them wisdom and discernment. Lord, we pray today that their decisions and their actions would not be based upon any outside influence, but Lord, upon their convictions, the convictions of their conscience. And Lord, that you would be speaking to them. And Lord, that whatever is decided here today would be according to your will, to your glory. Father, we thank you for having heard our prayer. We thank you, Lord, that you are always faithful to listen. And Lord, we just pray once again that you would have your way with this meeting. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, and we'll do the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. We have any actions to be taken out of closed session?
No, Mr. President.
This is a public meeting. At this time is for public comment. You may address the board on items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of IID, but not an item on the agenda. Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name's Oscar Gonzalez, resident of El Centro. In obedience to my conscience, I would like to submit an opinion, and I wrote it because I'm very verbose, and I can get into a tangent and go to cloud, get out of this universe and go get intellectually entangled. Anyway, in obedience to my conscience, the IID Board exists to aid in the conduct of people's business. It is the intent of the law, specifically Government Code 54963, that actions and deliberations be taken openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give public servants the right to decide what is good for the people, to know what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created, often referred to as the quote-unquote Sunshine Act. The paragraph just quoted is from Ralph M. Brown Act. An intent unlawfully deprives the public of information which the member knows or has reason to know that the public is entitled under the Ralph M. Brown Act is guilty of a misdemeanor. The IID ratepayers contribute millions of dollars in legal fees to protect the shared IID assets, interest, and to advise those that we elect, you people up there. You, the IID board, this same IID rate, taxpayers' money spent on legal fees should not be used with malice, intent, or an illegal advice to purposely violate or circumvent the Brown Act, or to lead the IID in any type of detrimental direction. I submit, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the following. 1, My understanding of the Brown Act is misinterpreted. Or 2, present legal counsel failed to advise the board of a violation. Or 3, the board of directors ignored legal counsel's advice in executive session. Unless I'm uninformed, and I've got 34 years to prove that, gentlemen. I've been on the battlefield for 34 years. Unless I'm uninformed of the Brown Act, any action taken in violation of the appropriate government code section is null and void. As a board, please do the right thing. And I'm going to say it gingerly, with a lot of honey. As the board, please do the right thing. Correct this past illegal action by announcing publicly all discussions and actions that the public was unlawfully deprived of recently. Only after the public has had the opportunity to be informed and participate should the IID board continue to move forward and take care of public's business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public at this time?
I want to give a copy to every board member and council, and so the paper doesn't, one for every board member, yourself, and general manager. Yes, and I don't want anybody to misinterpret, because it's right there in black and white, and the paper has a very good, subtle way of skewing everything, like they did the article yesterday on bonds and everything, and the paper is very powerful, but I've been at this for a long time. And I don't want to be called a blogger anymore. So Oscar Gonzalez.
Thank you, Oscar.
Walter Holtz, Imperial, California. For years and years now, I've been complaining about the water delivery on the North Gate. We just had another 6-day carryover up there. This has been going on for 10 years at least. And it's got to the point now where it's no longer good enough that we're working on it. We're going to try to fix it. We're going to do something. It's come time to fix it. And I don't know what that takes, but I think you better get to doing it, because as far as I'm concerned, what's going on now is gross negligence. And I want to know who I can send a bill to for my crop losses up there. I'd like an answer to that.
Jim?
You know, I've got a right to water delivery the same as everybody else. And the district bylaws say no more than a 3-day carryover. Same amount of water, the same time, the same everything as every other acre in this valley. And I'm entitled to it. I pay my water availability charges and everything else. I ain't skimping on nothing.
Jim, can you follow up with that for us? Whether there was a 6-day?
I just need a little more information from the gentleman so we can research what his issue is and where it's at specifically. Just Northgate.
And can you bring back an update on the history of that Northgate Canal for the board?
Sure.
Northgate.
Good afternoon, Tony Ramos, Centro resident. I want to thank my compa Oscar for what you just said about the Brown Act. You know, the Brown Act is like the Constitution, like the First Amendment to the Constitution says about freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom to gather, and freedom to come here and question boards like this. Those two, the First Amendment to the Constitution and the Brown Act, are the most precious things when it comes to public rights, speaking, and to being able to defend ourselves. You know, the public does not have to explain to you people, and I say this in a genuine positive sense, why we're here, whether you like or you don't like what we say. Even if you don't like it, that's tough. That's why I think it's tough to run for board members like this, because you have to have a thick skin. If I say, you know, I don't like your hairstyle, Mr. Sanchez, and damn, you know, I'm not going to run again for that. Shit, then you're hurting. I like, I think Mendo's hairstyle more than I do the others, but in any place, if I said that kiddingly also, then the premise of what I'm trying to say is that you got to be real thick-skinned to run for office. You got to know where to take the punches and when to not, and even when not to take them, go forth. And my good friend Stella knows about a lot about that. Two things I came here for today was one, I think even the Brown Act, Mr. Brady, I think you should look into it. And none of these members of the IID asked me to come here. But I saw a letter in the paper where a gentleman came here and talked about during the earthquake when he was told to go to work, and then he was told to go home, and they were replaced by another company that does work for you. What's the name of the company?
Called outsourcing.
Pardon me? The company that
Outside
does-
contractor.
I said contractor, yeah. You know, and I was at the meeting, and I say it again, Mr. Hanks and Mr. Sanchez, when the employees were there before the election, and they were told to go home. Some of them were told to go home, and they said, well, how come we should go home? We're employees, and these other guys are working for us. And to me, you know, I said before, these other guys are scab workers. You know, that's the way I call it. That's why I call it back when I walked with Cesar Chavez and them. You defend and you protect your employees to the fullest extent. And then for someone to say that the employees can't come and talk, they have to get permission, I think that's a violation of the Brown Act. Because there's a separation there. Once they come here in their own time, you can't tell them not to come here. I think that's a complete violation of Brown Act, what Mr. Gonzalez just said right now, to keep them from saying something because they're going to be censored, or because their pit boss, or because their supervisor is going to get back at them at work when they go back to work. That's not right. And I think, Mr. Garber, you should look into that. You cannot tell employees, I think, not to come forth and speak forth. What do you think of that?
You don't have any comments at this time, Tony.
Okay, no problem, but I think deep down you may agree with me that the public as the employees, and in their own time, they can come and speak about anything at any time. I did when I was working for the probation department. And only one time did I have a department head call my boss, Mike Kelly, and say, you know what, I see Tony running around. Hey, he's on his own time. Take 2 hours, 3 hours of annual leave or whatever, and I took it on my own time. And thank God for Mike Kelly, because he never took that upon me to put me against the wall. He always helped me. So that said, the other thing is that this lawsuit brought by my good friend Mike Morgan there, who gave me a couple of bags of onions this past time, and I hope that's not a compromise over anything. And they're still good. We're still eating them, Mike. You know, he's got a right to do that, I guess. As a citizen, he's got a right to do that, and whoever else joined him, he's got a right to do that. You know, I hold no against it. The only thing I do say is for him and you guys to do what's best for the ratepayers. If it's going to cost us a lot because of whatever happens, building a new power plant or rebuilding it or whatever, then I think it should be in the best interest of the public. One thing I do know is that some of the investors that were going to buy the bond things or something like that are afraid to do it now because they say it's a shaky area. So is it good what he did? Is it isn't good? I don't know. It's going to be between this attorney and their attorney. But I don't hold that against Mike. That's his right to do that. And that's the American way of doing things. You know, you stand up. You know, myself, if I was doing all this in Mexico, I'd have been dead 10 years ago. I would have. Either put in a solvent or hanged or decapitated or something. Because people don't want people like myself to be doing that in Mexico. But thank God in God we trust over there, and thank God for America. Thank God that I served and I held my hand up to serve my country 4 years too, in the U.S. Air Force, 66 to 70. And people, you know, you're going to have people like myself, like Mr. Gonzalez, like this gentleman with the water issue that he has. And I end by saying this, Board, do what's best for the ratepayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any other questions or comments from the public?
My name's Jeff Zinn, heavy equipment operator, 20 years here at IID. I'm not sure if this was read already, the response to my statement on...
That's going to be the next item, Jeff.
Should I let it be read before I make my comments?
Yeah, if it's on the agenda.
It's up to you, Jeff.
I would prefer that.
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks.
Are there any public comments? All right. Are there any comments from the board members, starting with Director Mendoza?
No comments at this time.
Director Abadi?
I'll say my comments for the items on the agenda.
Director Manville?
I will be going to the Colorado River Board meeting tomorrow in Ontario, and then also just wanted to say at the WCA Water Conservation Advisory Board meeting last Thursday, Jim Ross gave a presentation on a water department reorg, PowerPoint presentation at WCAB. I thought he did a very good job, and I thought it was well received. And then also yesterday at Farm Bureau, he was asked to update on what was going on with the water reorg, which he did without a PowerPoint, but I thought it was well received there also. All right, thank you.
Director Hanks?
Because we have a long agenda, I'll say my comments.
All right, I have no comments. General Manager?
Just that item number 14 on the consent calendar, based on a request, we're going to put that at the end of the action calendar. That's all.
Legal?
No comments, sir.
All right, moving on to informational items. Number 1, administrative support response to public comments made by IID employee on June 22nd, 2010. Mr. Campbell?
I wasn't planning on reading the information that I had submitted to the board, just basically talking through some of the key points. That, again, the earthquake on Easter, by about 5:30 that day, we had established the EOC, which included radio communications, satellite communications to our remote locations. And per our policy or standard procedure, instructed security gate guards to make sure that everybody checked in, logged in at the EOC, and we in fact posted guards at the EOC itself. As mentioned multiple times to the board in either updates or at presentations, staff have done an incredible job with recovery activities, both on Easter and following that activity. I had multiple times made the statement that we didn't have to call anybody in, and my comments are specifically to the EOC that typically in running an operation like that, there's quite a few assignments that are expected to take place, but we had appropriate staff members show up to participate and take on the responsibilities of running an EOC. As identified in my response, one of the learnings that we had is that strength and excess become a weakness, and one of our strengths is our staff knows what to do in terms of managing outages. The challenge is, in this particular case, as this is a disaster beyond the scope of just the IID. It's a county activity and then eventually a state activity. And of course, we all know the federal government has declared this a disaster as well. There are responsibilities and accountabilities in providing a structure that is important to manage that response. Unfortunately, as we identified through the evening and afterwards, and we will have a lessons learned activity post the earthquake disaster recovery activity. Not everybody in the district may be aware of the responsibilities of the EOC and the importance of having that communication centralized through the EOC, and that may have caused some confusion with supervisors and staff throughout the district. But fundamentally, that day at 5:30, between that time and midnight, the responsibility was receiving calls, reporting those activities, tracking those activities, trying to prioritize those, and making sure that we're doing triage as best as possible. As indicated to the board in an update later that evening, we decided around 8:45 that we would, based on the fact that the information at that time, most of the critical issues had been taken care of, and that it would be acceptable to have energy resources continue working through the night. But those of us in the EOC at that time thought it would be impractical and imprudent to allow water staff to continue working out on banks, given the condition that, again, may not be able to see that. We actually closed down the EOC around midnight, and that's not a fair statement to say we closed down. We did have staff there all night long to help continue to track any calls that may have come in, with the expectation that we would be meeting again at 6 o'clock in the morning to start, as they identified here, what was fixed, what needs to be fixed, how do we prioritize the work, how do we allocate resources, and then make assignments to get that done. Now, staff does show up at their regularly scheduled hours, and certainly that's the right thing to do. I think it's slightly unreasonable to expect that we would have plans in place by 6 o'clock in the morning on how we were going to address all the issues. Obviously, staff was assigned to activities that was already scheduled the week before until we could arrange for plans to be deployed to do the recovery. With regard to contracting and using outside resources, I think the board was led to believe, in the public as well, that potentially we were doing something without bids, without following due process, and is indicated in my notes that clearly was not the case, that despite what some may feel, we had the foresight, the district had the foresight to create RFQ 640, which specifically identifies how the district could deploy resources in the event of emergencies, specifically outside contractors to help augment and do the recovery activities for different work activities, specifically related to disaster or declared emergencies. CalEMA and FEMA has very strict requirements when it comes to the bidding process. Specific to any contract like that, there has to be information for staff, for labor, for materials, and for equipment. And while CalEMA and FEMA could not specifically endorse or come to this meeting to endorse, they did say that we certainly have a very good process in place. We have a good document that helps validate. And you know, at the end of the day, when we get the audits for our recovery activity for the refund of costs for earthquake damage repairs, that will be the test of whether or not we did the job correctly. And I think that we'll find that those contracts helped us make sure that we got the work done. With regard to the use of contracts, I will read this statement because everywhere I worked, it's always been somewhat of a concern. Why are we using outside resources? And this statement is a statement that I hold personally true wherever I have worked. Contractors have one fundamental purpose: to provide a short-term service, expertise that either does not currently exist with staff or within a time frame that cannot be met with existing staff. Clearly, the district was faced with pretty significant issue, and at the EOC and within management, we were actually, facing two competing objectives. One, continuing operation of the district, and per the resolution that was passed by the board, to expedite the repair and replacement of the energy and water systems. Well, one should assume that there was a pretty full work schedule before the earthquake, which means we were not going to meet both those objectives with the existing staff and therefore needed to augment that. There was a comment regarding potentially misalignment of resources and potentially that the board was left the opinion that certain individuals were not engaged in supporting the earthquake activity. And as you can see by the information provided, yes, we had staff working on earthquake activities. The information is used in documentation that is reported to FEMA, and it is all public information, but this serves as an example. I understand that staff may have concerns for the decisions that management makes from time to time. I think Senator Monahan said it best: everyone's entitled to their opinion, but nobody's entitled to their own set of facts. Hopefully the board and the public understands that we took the appropriate actions. We had the pieces in place that were important to be able to keep the business moving forward and meet the expectations of dealing with the significant impact of the earthquake. Are there opportunities for improvement? Absolutely. And like I said, we will be having a post-earthquake activity to talk about what are the lessons learned and how do we improve the process. Because as we know in this environment, this is probably not the only earthquake that we're going to experience. And so we need to get in a better position for the next time we have an emergency. With that, I'll open it up to the board for any questions or comments they may have.
Does the board have any questions?
I have a question. In looking at the timesheet for this particular employee, is this similar to the other employees that were involved after the earthquake?
I expect that there's a lot of employees that have similar time cards. We are tracking and using that information to identify how we can do recovery with CalEMA and FEMA. But again, I just wanted to make sure that the board understood that if there was an impression that this individual was not involved with the earthquake, that may not have been a completely accurate statement.
And how are you doing with the documentation for the recovery, cost, allocation, and so forth for the earthquake?
That has got to be probably the toughest part of any recovery activity. That again, that which the district is best at doing is getting work done, particularly out in the field. The challenge is getting all the documentation put together, reviewing all the time cards, getting all the materials identified. In one case, early on in this process, FEMA was expecting that we would include the cost of the purchase of our materials, even though it was materials that we had on site in our warehouse. We've worked through that. They're accepting the fact that our materials were pre-purchased and they're just part of our inventory stock. But there is a lot of activity with that. We have on the water side over 190 projects that we're working to get the PWs, which is the project worksheets, submitted to FEMA. It had been a challenge. We've reallocated resources, moved them into the EOC location down at the Emergency Management Center. We're down in Valley Plaza. That way we could keep the people focused on getting the paperwork done, facilitate better communication, make sure that we're getting the answers. We even have FEMA resources on site to be able to answer the questions. So out of the 190 that we need to get done, as of Friday last week, we had over 100 of those completed. 153, I think, is the total. We still have more to do, and of course, the latter ones are going to be the tougher ones because they're going to be bigger projects. Somewhat of an update. For all intents and purposes, the projects are completed. There's about 16 projects that can't be completed. Of course, Siphon is one of those. Some of the outstanding work we will have to do estimates, and the reason that they're outstanding is because we're waiting for outages, scheduled outages, in particular canals, so that we can complete those repairs. Other than that, we are, in my estimation, 90-95% complete with all the earthquake recovery work.
I don't think the question, Mr. Campbell, was whether or not the issue of whether they had to go out to bid for an emergency. There is an exemption to that. It's in the new policy for procurement of goods and services under emergency conditions. I think the question's been is how were our resources and our workforce effectively managed and exhausted an immediate time that's necessary as they're trained to do before the contractor. I understand the need for contract. There's a lot of damage out there.
Yes. And
the question is whether or not we effectively manage according to the training that our guys have been trained to do and do what they told. If you're not, that's what seemed to be more of the question is they show up for this because they receive a lot of training, then they're told to go home. That to me was with a confusing partner saying that contractors were already in place to do this. Now, if that's true, they're told to go home. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because they already had another job or something else for them. Don't know.
Well, the contractors were in place as of March of 2008 based on the contract or the agreement, RFP 640 that the board approved back in March. So technically the contractors were in place. No contractors were on site on Sunday, Easter. And again, Monday morning is when we talked about how we would engage internal resources and external resources to meet both objectives, fixing the system and maintaining the operations of the district.
Of those 190, and how many can you tell me how many the contractors did and how many our own workforce did? And of the 10 left to be complete, who's doing those?
I can get that for you, yes.
Any other questions from the board?
I just want to say that Sunday evening I went down to water control because that's where they had the emergency room set up.
And signed in.
And the place must have had 30 or 40 people in there. There were phone banks going. I know that, and on a chalkboard or on the whiteboards, they were calling in saying what the damage was. And I know there was extensive damage, and I think the main thing is that we had to make sure that, especially from the damage in the southwestern part of the district, that we tried to get the canals fixed to keep the water flowing to the farmers to keep the crops going. And I was there for maybe 2.5 or 3 hours, and I left. But I know there was an intense activity going on. Nobody knew how bad the damage was. And until the next morning, when actually they could see visually what was going on. And I understand where Mr. Zinn was coming from when he gave the report the other day, but I know from looking at the time cards, he did not get shorted on time, but I can understand his situation of, on Monday, not going right into the earthquake recovery or repair work. But I think that all of the people involved, both the IID employees who were involved and even the contractors from the outside, I think they all did a fantastic job of trying to get the system back together, trying to get the water delivered to the farmers. And I think the IID did an outstanding job of taking care of the roughly $10 or $11 million worth of damage we had here from that earthquake. And believe me, every time it shakes again, I think we all dread what may be coming in the future.
Right.
So I think all the employees that were participated did a fantastic job. I know there's a little rub on how some things went down, but you know, I think we learned from those things, as you said. We try to be better prepared the next time.
Any other comments from the board? We have any comments from the public?
I may have prevented some of my coworkers in the back to have their opportunity to speak publicly about these issues also.
They can speak after you.
Okay, good. First off, Mr. Campbell, you said I had made a statement that that I wasn't worked on the earthquake recovery when Director Mendoza asked you, and I never made that statement. There's my time cards, or my record of them are here. If you compare these to what the outside contractors, the amount of hours that they worked, they were working 24/7. And in your report, you stated that because of OSHA regulations that we wouldn't be allowed to do that. I'm not sure if the contractors follow different OSHA regulations than we do, but somehow they were able to work around the clock. And not only that, but just so the public knows, the contractors' operators rate is about $56 and change compared to operator 2 in heavy equipment here at the district. We make $27.15 an hour. So it's not hard to do the math. That's more than twice what we charge for our own men. You go into double time, you're talking $112 an hour. So you can do the math. I know personally one operator with an outside contractor that made approximately $20,000 in the month of April just as an employee working on the earthquake recovery. That said, is it your contention there were no contractors in the EOC Easter Sunday night? That is my contention. Mr. Curtis, is that your contention that there were no contractors in the EOC Sunday night of Easter Sunday night?
Jeff, can you direct your questions to us, please?
Okay. I would like somebody to ask Mr. Curtis whether there was any outside contractors in the EOC Sunday night, the evening of the earthquake.
General Manager.
Well, I failed to see the relevance of whether there were or were not individuals that happen to be a contractor in the EOC is not relevant, quite frankly. I don't, Mr. President, I don't see this as a, is this a interrogation? Is it, what are we doing here? Mr. Campbell just told you how we conducted the Emergency Operations Center. I understand Mr. Zinn has some concerns about that. I've met with Mr. Zinn last week or the week before. We went over those. I'd be happy to meet with him again on this. But I don't think it's appropriate.
I think this
for
board is giving him the opportunity to speak on the issue, and as any other employees can have their opportunity to speak, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll probably receive an answer. I think that's directed more toward the general manager.
The reason I asked that question is Mr. Campbell said there were no contractors at the EOC that night. That was just in his statement a few minutes ago when he was at the podium. And I know for a fact that that's not true, and I would like that to be noted, that there were contractors there. And in our meeting that I had with Mr. Brady the other day, it was admitted there were contractors there. So there's a contradiction there that I'd like to be brought to light. What is the protocol for district employees during a natural disaster in regards to their response? Has it changed in the last few years? Because as far as I know, you are to secure your home and show up to work if you are trained as I am as a first responder and go through all the training that is needed to pass all the FEMA and CALEMA, whatever.
Well, that's who would be better to answer that question? Because Mr. Campbell responded with the RFQ that was passed in March 2008, having to do with outsourcing. So what happens with the first responders? Have you had a workshop with our General Manager Brady, a workshop with the employees of how business is changing, or et cetera?
I heard about 3 different questions there, but I think what would be appropriate is to get all of the comments the employees might have. We'll note all those, and then we can come back with some answers and some other information.
Well, for example, on the RFQ that was passed, I'm not sure what the vote was, 4-5-0, on the outsourcing. I think probably that needs to be explained as well, and how things could change.
Well, Mr. President, members, the board did, this was before I came, that was the month before I came in, but it is a fact that the board did pass contracts that allowed us to have contractors in. I'm not quite sure the relevance of finding out what the vote was or whatever reasons. It is a fact that we do use outside contractors for this type of work, and we will continue to do so.
The question was, what is the policy for employees during a natural disaster? I was under the impression that the policy was to secure your house and show up for work, because the lines of communications may be down You may be needed, they may not be able to get a hold of you, and that was what we were told to do with, if I remember correctly, that if we didn't, we could be subject to disciplinary action.
General Manager, you probably have to have him, again, go through, since everyone's here, I think the board owes it to the employees to listen to all their concerns, and then staff will be writing down notes and then have the appropriate workshops to be able to explain things further. Do you have any more concerns?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Zinn?
So, how were the contractors contacted Easter Sunday evening? What was the...
Well, Mr. Zinn, just again, go through your list of concerns, and then staff will be writing them down. And if anything is...
I would sure like to get some answers in a public forum, because I'm sure people would like to know how it was that the contractors were notified, but our own heavy equipment department wasn't called into the EOC the night of the earthquake to coordinate heavy equipment and the work that might need to be done. Somehow the contractors had staff on site at 6 o'clock Monday morning. That was the following morning of the earthquake. So evidently they were able to coordinate and be assigned, had their assignments for work at 6 in the morning. It took me until the following evening to have a assignment, and I work for the IID. So I'm just confused on how that was all, the timeline of that, and why the contractors were assigned to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't have any assignments till later on that afternoon, or at least I didn't.
And the question was again? You want to know? We want to know an answer as to why a contractor was used?
No, well, yeah, I'd like to hear that
Oh,
too. Except what I'm saying is, what was the procedure? How were they on the job at 6 o'clock the next morning if there was no contractors at the EOC, unless they were contacted and they were told where to go? How would they know to send their crews out to a job site at 6 in the morning without being assigned those duties?
Mr. Campbell?
Mr. President, if I might, you had mentioned to Mr. Zinn, and I presume others, that they can have all their questions, they can come up at this point on this item. We will respond to them publicly. We'll just bring it back to the next meeting. I think that would be much more...
Some of us have to take time off from work to be here, and so it's not completely convenient for us to get our answers at the board meetings.
How many more questions do you have, Mr. Zinn?
Well, I guess it would probably depend on what answers I got, but if I don't get any answers, I probably have less questions. Let me see here.
Well, I think it all probably would come back around to why do we use contractors? And I think that the question has already been answered. So unless there's anything other than the contracting business, we could probably have your other employees speak of concerns.
I don't mind responding.
Oh, go ahead.
Again, a disaster occurred. There's a protocol that we follow for emergency responses. Being the manager who arrived first at the EOC, I took command of the situation, and by the powers invested by the board through that process, decision-making is my responsibility. Now, there were a lot of things going on simultaneously, as you can well appreciate. The phones were ringing. A lot of people had issues. The county had issues. We, in some cases, weren't responding appropriately to some of the county issues that had been identified. Again, part of it is The calls come in, we track the calls, we prioritize the calls. Part of our responsibility is how do we manage what we have, do an assessment, and make recommendations on how we move forward. If phone calls were made to contractors that evening, that probably happened. I'm not in a position to defend the decisions that I made on Easter Sunday to staff. My responsibility is to my general manager and the board and the public that I made the best decisions I could with the information I had at time and using staff to the best of my ability. Whether or not everybody gets to vote on how deployment of resources take place is not something I'm willing to take.
Mr. Zinn, other than if you have any other questions besides the contracting?
Yes, I do. Here in his statement, it says contractors have one fundamental purpose: to provide a short-term service / expertise that either does not currently exist with staff or within the time frame that could not be met with existing staff. It says right in there that that's short-term, that contracting should be short-term. That's what the fundamental purpose. And if the question is whether we can meet the goal or we have the expertise, we've been doing these jobs longer than anybody, so there's no question of the expertise. And concerning the time frame, if the resources were being put in the correct places, I feel that we could have handled it ourselves. I mean, we still had maintenance things going on that could have waited until it wouldn't have been an interruption in service for the customers. As far as I'm speaking on the water side only, but it's down here on the bottom of that same paragraph. It says, assuming that before the earthquake staff work schedules were already appropriately loaded, we were not going to meet both objectives with existing resources. There's some concern, I have some concern whether staff was appropriately loaded. Some of the jobs, for instance, the day that I was the Monday after the earthquake, I was out pulling salt cedars on a drain ditch. So obviously that's not a high priority deal. It wasn't hampering the flow of the drains. There was no reason for me to be out there doing that.
I have a quick question for Dan. Dan, is this anywhere borderline negotiations?
At this point, I would say no.
And so down here a little lower in your statement, it says we would have placed the district at greater risk by using outside contractors to do standard maintenance and operations work that presenter contends, and I agree with him on this point, would not have the same knowledge of the system as existing employees. Well, that's what we're doing right now. We've got a whole bunch of guys here. They can raise their hand that are construction maintenance workers that are out cutting weeds and with shovels and hose. They're skilled construction maintenance guys that they're trained to replace gates and structures, and they have a lot of knowledge in that. And for some reason, our management has decided to contract out that work and put these guys out on the ditch bank 20, 30 at a time sometimes on one ditch to shovel weeds that are most likely going to go back in no time at all. And my question is, if this is supposed to be a money-saving deal, it seems that you could go to Labor Ready or some other place and get minimum wage guys and cut weeds and put these guys back to what they do, and we'd save some money there. So I'm not sure exactly why we'd have our skilled men doing doing manual labor.
Are there any other concerns?
I have more concerns, but I'm going to go ahead and, well, I would like to say this. While these guys were out hoeing weeds and doing menial work, taking them away from cleaning the trash racks and doing the work, keeping the drains open and doing the work that they are assigned and they're trained to do. As we speak, the Wormwood 7 drain ran over and blew out, washed out the structure and ran into Drew Road and made a big mess. They got a dozer and a backhoe, had to have it hauled out there with a load boy, a couple guys out there, gonna probably take about 120 yards of material to fill it all back in. If these guys would have been on their jobs doing what they're assigned to do, instead of being way out on the other side of Calapat, this probably wouldn't have happened. And so I think, I'm not sure, there's a feeling of retaliation going on with certain managers here at the district that when they are questioned and their programs or their motives are questioned, they're being retaliated, the workers are being retaliated against. And that's why these men are here today. They're proud. Some of these guys have been here 30 plus years, 20 plus years, and they feel like they're being retaliated by being put out on a ditch bank with a shovel and a hoe instead of doing the work that they were trained and hired on for. And I think that that's wrong. I think that Mr. Holtz here might have a ditch that runs water if we didn't have these guys being wasted out in Calapat somewhere on a ditch bank, maybe being punished for speaking up for their jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Zinn. We are looking into that shovel and a hoe. Director Body has a few pictures of that, and we'll probably in the next meeting we'll address that. Are there any other concerns?
Hello. Martin Mercado. I've been with the district since '74, probably before you were born, Anthony. 1974. One of the things that Mr. Minville mentioned was experience and training. I have to say that I was called on the earthquake, and I did respond. Some of us were on vacation, which I was, but as soon as morning, I was there. I was assigned probably about 60 employees plus equipment, and one of the things that kind of confused me in experience was they sent a crew from Imperial Dam, the whole crew, backhoe and all. So since they were a crew, I assigned them a job to do repair work, the Wormwood. I think you mentioned the Wormwood. Well, they called me up and they were confused because they never done that type of work. I'm not putting my fellow IID employees down, but they did not have the
You're talking about the contractors or our employees?
Our employees.
They didn't know how to do the work?
No, from the dam.
Okay,
the
you
dam.
got me confused.
Okay. No, I'm talking about our employees.
Your employees,
yeah,
okay.
I was assigned about 60 employees.
They came from the River Division
River.
over here?
Yeah.
Okay,
In other words, they weren't really interviewed to see if they had done this type of work.
I see.
So I sent them as a crew to do a earthquake damage. And when I got there 2 or 3 hours later, I'll find out that they didn't know how to do that type of work. So I had to pull one of my guys to, we call him competent person, to be with him and show him how to do it. And I talked to my supervisor, Mr. Pomfrey, saying, you know what, I don't think I need him tomorrow. Because it's just a waste of time. They don't know exactly what they're doing, and we need to get this thing going. So I assigned my people, like you said, trained people to do the work. I think experience has a lot to do in how we do our work. I'm talking about the earthquake and work in general, because I know that I've been assigned the Southwest, and I've gone to 9 out of 10 structures that we have to go back and redo the structure. Leaky gates, just problems. They'll open the gate and the rubbers come out and so forth. Just endless work. I don't think there's a savings there. We'll have to send 3 or 4 guys.
Are these the new automated gates you're talking about?
No, Stella, it'll be the new structure gates.
The new structure,
The new
okay.
structure
The new
gates.
structures,
Whoever
okay.
puts them in, contractor, whoever it is. I show up on different jobs during the earthquake where contractors were assigned. And there was one occasion at the Fern Heading, I don't know if you heard about that one, but when they released the water was boiling out of the canal. I called headquarters to cut 40 feet out, and I waited. And here comes, I didn't know he was a contractor, and he said that what happened? Well, it was obvious the water was going down the road. I said, well, somebody messed up, the contractor did. I said, well, I'm the contractor. Well, I looked at him and said, well, you know what I said, but somebody messed up. So they made a cutout. I went back, being that it's my section, I went back again. And they were starting to repair the work 20, 30 feet down from the problem was at. And I looked at him and I go, you know what, I don't want to tell you your job, but you need to start over here at point 0 because you're going to have the same problem. So they did, and it worked. They were 12 inches below grade. And there's several occasions where I do run into them and I do give them my opinion of how it should be done. And they do change their way of doing their job. I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but I'm saying that we do need experienced people out there. And I think we have them right here in this room. Thank you.
You know, I would like to make a comment that I've always believed that when we're going to be using contractors, we're going to be outsourcing, we need to make sure that the quality of the work is the same as what our employees are able to do. And that's my concern, Mr. Ross, that I've talked to you before with the contractors. How do you maintain the quality? How do you oversee the quality of the construction? I don't have a problem with our employees doing that because I know that they've been trained and they've been doing it for years and years. And that is one of the things that makes me uncomfortable is how do you account for the quality of the work for the contractors?
True. I can probably answer the North date to the gentleman here, but I'll let that go now. But experience has a lot to do how we do certain things. I don't know if anybody's here that has water from the Fern Canal. At the tail end, we have little heifers, little cattle, they're breeding, and you cannot just go in there and start cleaning because I think a year and a half ago, 2 years, some died. They were trying to blame us because of the dirty water. You have to do things in reverse. There's a lot of things you cannot do. Lotus, you have a lot of service lines in there. You're going to break every one of them. You just can't go in there and start cleaning. Where do you get that knowledge?
That's from experience.
Exactly.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Morales. I work for the heavy equipment. I've been employed here since 1981. Have you guys read the paper?
I don't read the Ivy Press.
Maybe you should, because there's an article in there about how good the work has been done by the contractors. It says in Holtville, when they put in the 9th Street underground, it started leaking. Now, there's an expense there. It's going to be brought to the IID. And they say that it's going to cost Holtville some money. Now, Estella, you know, the type of work that these contractors are doing, you know, you think that that's going to be something that's going to be brought to the attention of the contractor? I know the board will be. IID, they talked there about nothing but IID. IID installed, IID work, you know, nothing but IID. I remember that we used to be the pride of this valley. We never had any problems. Any work we did it right the first time. Yeah, maybe once in a while we'd had a little problem here and there. But most of the time, we did it right, and we only did it once. Now with all these contractors, we always have to go back. I'll give you another example. This is down here by the mall. The job they did at, at Dogwood and McCabe Road. It's leaking like a sieve. And what did IID do? They just buried it. You know, and what good is that? It says they can't do nothing with it. So I believe that we should have credit. Heavy equipment and all the employees that are here right now, you should give them credit. Because if they would have done it, they would have done it the first time and they would have done it right. I don't think that these contractors are the ones that are going to be doing this work right. We're going to have to go back. Someone's going to have to go back and redo all that. Don't you think it's better just to pay once instead of twice, maybe 3 times? Having the contractor come in and do all that work when you have all the experience right here. These guys been here like Mercado said. You have 20, 30, 15, 10 years of experience here. That should count for something. Usually when the contractor would come in, it's because we couldn't do the work because we were already swamped with work. That's when you brought in a contractor. But I don't see why you pick the contractor first and then we have to come back and redo the work. Don't you think that's a big expense? That's way big expense. Because then you're going to have to move equipment in and personnel and then bring in material to redo the job. But I think you guys should really think about what you guys are going to do with this. This is a big problem.
Mr. Morales, how many projects are you aware of that have been constructed by contractors and then they're defective? You mentioned Dogwood and McCabe.
Dogwood and McCabe, and then we did a crossing out here on I forget, it was for the state. We had done the crossing, and it was a 24-hour job.
Where?
It was on the Central Main, and I can't remember the crossroad of that, but it was a Central Main, and we did that job, and the contractor was doing the main part of it, and we were just doing the pickup work behind it, but the contractor didn't even know how to shape, or didn't even know how to do the tie-in, and it's a big canal. They were going to put rock in front of a structure. Within time, all that rock would have gone to the bottom of that canal, and then it would have washed out the banks. You know, stuff like that. That many contractors, they don't know how to do the job. I feel that if you're going to hire a contractor should be able to know how to do that job.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But most of these at least pay for their mistakes.
Well, that's the problem. You know, the thing is that we have to come in after them to rectify the problem. So why should we be able to do that? Why not do it right the first time?
All right. Are there any other concern? Are you?
Yeah, I'm done.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Morales. Dr. Brady?
Yes.
Could you look into this Dogwood and McCabe and
Yes,
the crossing?
We've written them all down.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other concerns? Tony?
Yeah.
Tony, can you hold on a second? I'm going to see if there are any more employee comments before. Okay. All right, Tony.
Thank you. I only come in as a ratepayer, not as an employee or an elected official or a CEO or an attorney. But it seemed to me like right now when Dr. Brady said they're being interrogated, good. It's good to interrogate the board and Dr. Brady and the attorney. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to call it interrogate, I think Mr. Zinn, all he was doing, expressing his concerns. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that, Stella, there should be an investigation done with the contractors as to what type of job they're doing. If employees have to go back and do the work correctly, we're spending double the money, and then my rate bill and my water bill is going to go up. I feel for these guys because I was an employee. Every time that we negotiated and went forth about issues that we had, and again, I think Mike Kelly was able to tell us what to do and meet us halfway. I don't see, not so much the board, but I don't see the CEO and the managers meeting the employees halfway on this. Mr. Zinn should not be retaliated upon because he came here and talked about this. Not at all. He could end up suing for doing that, which I'm sure he will or will not, because that's going to be his decision. But I think the employees have a right to come here at their own time and express their feelings. How else are they going to do it? It sure the hell didn't help talking to the managers, because that's why they're here. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And as a ratepayer, I feel that the employees should come first. Put the contractors to clean the canals and weed the canals and throw the trash. And let's let these guys do the training that they were hired to do. They go through an intensive background interview to get hired. And from what I know, IID only selects the best. And they should be the best doing the work for the people. Why should a canal, I didn't understand what Mr. Morales said right now about a canal leaking. I don't know how that works. But if it's leaking, they just put dirt over it, it's going to leak again. And then this other one that you said over here, that they didn't tie in something the right way, they have to go back and do it. Then it's another expense. We're not spending thousands, we're maybe spending millions on correcting work the contractor is doing still. You guys should order Mr. Brady.
Well, Tony, Jeff, how's our loss-win ratio when it comes to contractors who doesn't pay for their mistakes?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
I'm sure that we would go after them.
You'd have to, if a contractor did something that caused us damage and we thought that we could recover from the contractor, we certainly would.
As one director, that's a pledge that I have to the ratepayers, is when we do contract out, if they do make a mistake, they will pay for it.
Yeah. Well, has that happened with these two issues that they had to go back and?
Well, these two issues I think happened a while ago. The one in Hopeville is out of the city of Hopeville. They got the grant to do their underlining of the canal in Hopeville, which was probably the most recently in the last 2 years.
Look here, guys. I'll end. There's just one more minute. There's no job's going to be like probation work. We were trained. I got my AA, my BA. I was in the Air Force and everything. But I came back. I was proud of what I did. Whatever we wrote a report to the court, I had to approve it. But I knew what I was doing. And very seldom, maybe 2-3% of the reports came back, the judge had a question. The same thing here. These people are telling you these contractors aren't doing a good job, and I tell all of you, this should be investigated for the benefit of the public. And if you don't, we're going to be back here again in 2 weeks or a month telling you the same thing. These contractors don't have anything over us. The employees do because they work for us. They're part of the community. And maybe so the contractors, but I think the employees have the right to come here and not be retaliated upon and go back to do their job and even pat on the back for coming forth and talking about what these issues.
Tony, as far as what you've seen today, I think me as one director, we're giving as much time as
yes, sir.
For the employees.
And
to
all I
express
ask you, Anthony, because I followed you in your campaign a few times. Never talk bad about you, because I always said you talk good about the person that you're supporting. You don't talk bad about the other guys, none of you. But I saw you and Mr. Hanks. I've helped Mr. Menville and Stella, and I know Mr. Buddy stands for what's right, especially being the God-given Catholic that he is. You guys need to investigate this, and someone needs to order Mr. Brady and the attorney to look into this. It's serious business. I never knew about this. I don't like what I hear. So I hope you guys do that, please.
Thank you.
Please, Anthony, do that.
There's anything new?
Second, the job that Mr. Morales was talking about was on Kalen Road, the Central Main, the 111 bypass. That was the job he was referring to, that the contractors weren't able to do the job without. We were there to backfill and help them, and we ended up having to show them how to do the job. And the fact of the matter is that, like Mr. Mercado was saying, when these contractors put in these structures, gates, whatnot, they don't even know how to install the rubber seals. So they leak. We have to go right in behind them and replace them. Talking about losing water, you're losing revenue. So when that gate's leaking and water's running down the ditch, it's costing more money. And then our crews have to come in behind them and take care of those. And from what I understand, when the contractor's replacing the structures, more times than not, we have to go in behind them. That's over 50% of the time. We have to go in behind them and redo the seals, the rubbers, and whatever else is leaking, because they don't have the knowledge and the skill. and the years of experience to do the job.
I have a question, Mr. Sid.
Yes.
What were the dates when Dogwood and McCabe and the crossing and Kalen Road? We bring it back 2-3 years?
I couldn't tell you on the Dogwood and McCabe. That's been a few years back. The 111 bypass was during the holiday season because we worked, was it Thanksgiving or Christmas? Yeah. Anyway, it was around the holiday season because we came in on during the holidays, it came in and did part of that job.
And these structures that you're talking about that they leak, how many years back? How long?
Well,
a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Well, we've always had structures that leaked.
Yeah.
But what we're referring to is since the contractors came in and started doing the work that we used to do,
That's
and
what
they're
I'm trying
installing
to get
the
at.
new.
Well, how long ago did that happen?
Well,
Give me a time frame.
in the last couple of years that the
Last couple of
contractors have taken over installing the structures, they don't know how the seals and whatnot go to. And to be perfectly honest, that's not my expertise. So I'm an equipment operator. So the construction maintenance guys and Mr. Mercado could give you more definite information on that. But the point is that they're leaking, and we have to come in behind them. And I'm pretty sure the way I've always seen it at the district is you go out and you just take care of it, and it probably doesn't get billed back to the contractor. We just take care of it because that's what we do. You know, the guys that have worked here long enough, it's easier just to go fix the problem than it is to go chase down the money and the billing and all that. You just send somebody out and do it. So the contractors are making out because there's little repercussions for their poor workmanship. I'd like to thank the board for
Thank
your
you,
time.
Jeff.
You got a question? I got a question.
I just have a comment. There was a comment made about retaliation, and just for everybody's information, we do have a board policy, EL3, which states general manager shall not permit retaliation against any staff member for non-disruptive expression of dissent.
Correct.
Share that out there.
Hello, board. My name is David Arias, and I work for the drainage department. This is my first time that I've ever been to a board meeting. A little nervous, you know. I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. I got hired here approximately 20 years ago. Before I worked for the IID, I was a union carpenter. I was a journeyman carpenter. And I quit the union to come to work for the district. You know, I have given 19 years of my life to this company. I'm a little offended when we are told that we're not competent, that we can't do the jobs, that you have to hire a contractor to do our jobs. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of really good people here, and I learned a lot. I don't see the benefit in contracting our jobs out. I've always believed when you have a person do a job over and over, he becomes a professional at that job. And to bring somebody from the outside to do that job when they really don't have the qualifications to do it just because they're contractors, I think that's wrong. The people that are here are offended. That's why we're here, because we're being treated badly, of course. When you devote so much time, so much of your energy to an entity, to improve it, to make it better, it's hard. You guys have a job to do. I don't know your job, but I do know my job. I'm offended when I'm told that I have to go, cut weeds out on the ditch bank. Like I said, I am a journeyman carpenter to this day. I have my certificates, to this day. I can go back to doing what I did before. I love working here. I love the people. But, it seems to me that there is a bigger issue here, a bigger agenda here that we're not looking at, we're not seeing, and that is that we're being pushed out. I've heard many comments from many different people here in IID, from management to the bottom. You hear them, and one ear out the other one. But I do believe there's an agenda, and if you guys don't do something about it, we're going to end up going sideways. It's just a matter of time. I've always said, treat the IID money like if it was your money. And if it was your money, you wouldn't want somebody to come in and, do a crappy job that you're going to have to pay somebody else to fix again. I'm a man with limited income, so I have to budget, very hard to make ends meet. And I am not going to spend money somewhere where it's not going to work for me. And all that I ask you guys is treat IID money like if it was yours. We employees, treat us if we were your children. I have 4 kids, and I've always said, if I have $1, I'm going to give each one of them a quarter, the same. I've always believed in equality and accountability. Do that. And I have seen many things happen here at IID that people are not held accountable for. And I believe that people need to be held accountable. People need to start, really giving a care about IID. Sorry, my asthma's kicking in. Bring my inhaler. But I really do hope that you guys really listen and you guys take the time to find out who we are, the employees. We don't see you guys. We don't. You guys don't see us. Take the time, find out who we are, find out what we do. Don't get locked up behind doors and say, okay, everything's going to be taken care of. And please stop offending us when you say that we can't do the job. We can do it. We've done it over and over and over. I worked on Highway 86 back when it was being done. Now, you're going to ask anybody here or you guys, how many pipelines have leaked from that job? That was back in the 90s. How many? None. I did the job. We had contractors come in and say, we can't do the work that you guys are doing. We were averaging a concrete pipe every 3 minutes in the hole done. Contractor can't do it. Don't tell us that we can't do the job, because we can. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Question. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Kovich. I live in Imperial, California. And in 1991, I came to work for the district as an apprentice lineman. I was real fortunate, I got to retire this year. One of the reasons I retired early, and it was because I was disillusioned by the management of this company. I love the people I worked with. I love my job. But I got tired of being misled by management, told to do things, turn a blind eye, slow play so the contractors could have more work. So I decided to retire. You're going to see a few more people retiring because of the same reason. And it's sorry to say. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Abadi?
Yeah, but I was going to say this for general water matters, but I guess, Dr. Brady, can you tell me why they're out there cutting weeds on the High Line out there on Young Road and not on their machinery, such as the North Date, where it looks like we have a potential problem, and also the Wormwood?
On behalf, Mr. Ross has that information.
Yeah, I can't tell you why they're not on some other job. I can tell you that we have put a lot of resources on our vegetation efforts that we've discussed here at the board meeting previously. So, the ones we're talking about are simply folks who are trying to reuse our resources where the critical need is apparent. And we've allowed a lot of our vegetation areas to get out of control. A lot of this stuff was not handled for quite some time. Some of it's right next to the concrete edge where you need to do shovel work. You can't really do it very effectively with machinery. So yeah, there's some of that kind of work going on out there. And but if there's other emergencies that come up that were referenced here today, then we'll definitely be pulling those guys off to go respond to those emergencies.
Well, the other question was how those weeds get so tall. Seems like another section in your weed management in that section is what's failing here. Well, the shovel work I saw going on is simply chopping the tops of a conchinilla or an arrowweed. Doesn't do any good. It's going to come back.
Well, it's going to have to be sprayed after it's chopped. You're right. And as I said, we've had this conversation before about the fact that we cut our vegetation budget in the past, and as a consequence, we haven't been keeping up the spraying, and then now we've got a lot of large weeds that we aren't going to be able to spray effectively. We're going to have to chop them down, get them to the right growth rate, and then spray them. And so we're trying to deal with the mechanical piece of that now, and then we're hoping to deal with the spraying segment of it by beefing up our spray budget in the 2011 budget.
Why wasn't that work contracted out?
Well,
and
some
put
of
our
it can
people
be.
back on the drains and the ditches where they had these two problems on the date and then the Wormwood drain.
Well, we're responding on a daily basis to what the priorities of the moment are. And for right now, we've got some of these areas that have kind of gotten out of hand and allowed our operations guys to kind of decide this is something we're getting a lot of complaints about. This is a location that needs attention. And so we've put a lot of folks up there trying to address it quickly so that we can move on to something else.
Do you have those mowers going back to work?
I don't believe we have any mowers. I
Maybe getting some.
I believe we used to have mowers in the past, from what I understand. We haven't had them for a while, and part of the problem was that they were extremely high maintenance. They were breaking down quite often, so we had difficulty maintaining them. So at least that's the information that I have on mowers. But I think even if we had the mowers, this isn't probably the kind of work that you can do effectively with mowers. It's something where you got to chop the weeds off. You're near concrete. You really don't want to run a power blade around concrete and trying to clean this areas up. I think in the past we've had our Zen Harrows do some of this work for us, and we hope to have them do some more of that work in the future after we get it under control. But right now we're simply trying to get it under control.
That's where I think the mower, what its purpose was to buy you time till your weed spraying crew could get there. It was to keep it under control so it didn't, whether it's under a power line for those issues or whether it's in a canal. It was a buy time till the spray crew could get there.
Yeah, could be.
And as far as on some of these other things that the contractors have done that are leaking, I'm not sure, maybe it's something for internal audits they could track or look up. It seems like it's been going on for a while, so I wouldn't even know where to start.
Well, I can tell you there's usually two sides to every one of those stories.
Yeah, Mr. Ross, and I don't know whether Mr. King can answer this because he's worked with the construction on the water side, but when the contractors come to do work from the outsourcing work, is there not an IID person that's there that has the expertise to know how the canal is supposed to be shaped or the gates are supposed to be put in or whatever? Is somebody not there with those guys or following up on the work to make sure the work is being properly done? And then also, if we have a problem or it's not done right, is there somebody that's, penalizing those guys? We just don't pay them 100%, and then we got a leaky deal like you said on Dogwood over at the mall, but they got to come back and replace it on their own nickel, not charges. So, there's got to be something in place that's going along in order to run this operation.
There is. There's management of the contract itself, which is handled by a number of employees, both in my department as well as in the general services. And then there is inspection follow-up, and we're trying to beef up those operations so that we can even do a better job than we may have done in the past. I can't tell you that an employee accompanies every contractor on every job, but I do know that we do have a responsibility, and if we're not following that responsibility, I definitely want to address it. But we have a responsibility to make sure the contractor delivers what he's been paid to deliver, and if he doesn't, then he needs to rework it or remove it, or or he doesn't get paid. So there is accountability in the contracts, and we are responsible for enforcing those contracts. And if there's instances when we're not doing that, then I need to know, and I'll be happy to follow up. But I don't think it. There may be anecdotal issues out there, that people will point to, but the ones that I'm aware of and I ask questions about, I find out there's usually two sides to every story.
Dr. Mendoza?
Yeah, Mr. Ross, what is the budget for the spraying for this coming year, for this year?
I'm not sure what the total budget is this year. I know that it was cut by like $1 million.
I remember that.
A couple of years ago. And so our intent in the next budget is to try and restore as much of that as we possibly can, given our, our financial budget crunch. But as I've stated, that is one of our priorities, is to try and start beefing that up. We have, our vegetation guy, David Watson, working with our staff to come up with a program that shows me, you know, what can we accomplish if we add 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 to beef up that, and then where can we get to the point that we should be, and how, can we do that in 1 year with so much money, or does it take 2 years or 3 years? So I'm looking for a plan, and I'm hoping to have that within the next 30 days. So that we know what we need to ask for, and you know what we can tell you it will accomplish, and try and measure that accomplishment. But we're well aware of the problem, and we're trying to address it. But we're in the middle of the budget, not in the beginning of it right now.
I'd like to make one more comment regarding outsourcing or outside contractors. I think that there's a place for outsourcing, and there's a place for our employees to do their job. I would prefer to have our employees do the job, number one. And I know that there's times where there's too much work to do, and at that time we should outsource, but not to replace our employees. What I would like to know, Dr. Brady, is all these contractors we have, I know that they have a certain amount. How many of these jobs that they have completed for us, is there an overrun in the budget? Are they budgeted? Did they complete the jobs as far as their estimate, or did they go over the estimate? Compare that cost to what it would cost to have our employees do the work. If you can get something like that, I don't know who
We'd be happy to bring that back.
Bring that back and see,
Sure.
and compare apples to apples.
Sure.
And because I've always maintained that our employees are the heart and soul of the IID, and we should be proud of what we have.
Project management, Angel, can you run that report on those different ones? Sorry about that. On those projects?
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Some of those things are operational work, so we wouldn't have the data in the project management area. We would have the information for projects,
For capital
through project
versus
management,
O&M.
capital,
Right.
but not O&M.
But I'm sure that Brawley bypassed that deal, and I'm sure those other ones that required MWAs, they were certainly expensive.
For capital projects, MWAs, we do have the information. For O&M, we don't. I don't have access to that.
Okay, we'll be moving on to item number 2. Energy compliance update. Mr.
Yes,
Campbell.
Mr. Campbell has that. He has a presentation. Okay.
Well, let's see what we can stir up on this one.
I agree.
Oh, my favorite.
This is another one of the favorite topics. This is an update to the board and to the public regarding energy reliability compliance. And this first slide is really just a recap of, well, actually it's a duplicate of one from the previous presentation. That in March 2008, WEC compliance audit team identified reportable violations from an audit conducted here at the IID. In October of 2009, IID and WEC finalized the audit results, and those were submitted to NERC and then to FERC for approval. In 2009, WEC did forward those to NERC for approval, and earlier this year, NERC forwarded those to FERC for approval. And we, at this point in time, we still have not heard. It has not been published the results from FERC regarding their acceptance of the settlement agreement between IID and WEC. And unfortunately, because it is a settlement agreement, it does still require the non-disclosure agreement and needs to remain confidential until it becomes public. We're under the impression that that information will be coming out anytime in the last 2 months. It still has not come out, and obviously, we're anxious to get that information, to get that out in front of everybody, to let everybody know where we were with this. And unfortunately, we don't have any pre-notification. Everybody will know at the same time, so even with all the inquiries we've had, we won't be able to identify ahead of time when that information will become available. There are some changes since the last update, and I think they're pretty significant and important for everybody to have an appreciation for. We've made some changes with compliance organization, with staffing, and these are, I think, positive moves forward to help move the district closer to meeting the expectations of the December audit and the expectations that we all have that IID will be as compliant as possible and performing well, not only in the audit, but with regards to reliability with the expectations set by NERC and FERC. In June, we filled the compliance officer position that was vacated by Sabrina Barber. Our new compliance officer is Tina Zaragoza. Please stand. Tina's been with the district for over 10 years, been working in the energy department, specifically down at the SOC. So as the board is aware, a lot of the items specific to what compliance is in the area of SOC. So it's to our advantage that we have an individual who's somewhat versed in the operational aspects of those critical areas for NERC, WEC, and FERC activities. And it's been a month now. It's a month, so feet to the fire.
And he's still smiling.
And he's still smiling. He understands the challenges that are there, but I think the other changes that were made with the compliance office will put him in a position of being well supported. Part of that is the entire compliance office, instead of just the compliance officer, reports now to the general manager, which will be assigned to me as the chief administrative officer to provide oversight to the compliance office and help move that forward with a dotted line again to the board as an escalation point in case issues come up. Within the energy department, one of the things that Mr. Jane had done in response to some of the concerns that had been identified that with all the compliance activity, there's about 13 owners of standards, which creates sometimes a little bit of confusion, as we all know. Some truth to the adage that a camel is a horse defined by committee. The more people get involved, the more challenging it can be to get straight answers and consolidation of information and consistency in the information. So what Mr. Ajane has done is appointed Dan McCann, who's the assistant manager for system trading operations, designated as the single point of contact within the energy department. So now the compliance office really only has to deal with one person to make sure that expectations are being met, help identify where problems exist, where do we need to provide assistance in training and monitoring and mentoring, and if we're having issues with self-certification, self-reporting, those types of things, quality of information, Dan's the guy that we get to go to. And Dan has been charged with holding other people within the energy department accountable for making sure that we are moving forward with this. To help Dan out, there's been 2 additional compliance administrator positions filled just this past month. To assist Dan with, again, there's a significant amount of documentation. Again, the majority of operational requirements reside within the SOC area or within his areas of responsibility. So it became critical that we dedicate staff to providing assistance with the documentation requirements and helping coordinate information and get that flow of information working better within the department and with the compliance office. So those are some pretty significant changes that I think are, again, we expect to see progress as we move forward with compliance. One of the things that Tino and I and the compliance office did right after Tino started was we said we need to come up with what's our list of primary activities and what is it that we will hold ourselves accountable to and be reporting back to the board on a frequent basis. And the things that we think are important is we've got to get the compliance office program development completed. As the board heard in closed session, there's been an awful lot of work that's been done by the compliance office that maybe the compliance office didn't need to be doing, which drew our focus away from some of the other things that are important to get that office established and moving forward. We're refocusing on we've got to get the compliance office program put together and facilitate from a stronger position in that regard. Part of the issue that we have is inconsistency of information. And it's not that people aren't trying to get the information correct. It's how do we put, again, there's several hundred requirements within the 93 standards that make it difficult to make sure that everybody's putting documentation together the same way. So one of the important things that we want to stay focused on is how do we get some tracking software implemented so that there's better recording of information, tracking of information, and accessibility of information. We need to continue the gap analysis and remediation of activities. As the board is aware, and we'll talk about later, the standards are changing. There's more requirements, and part of what we need to do is continue that diligence in what are the gaps between the standards, the requirements, and where we are with the IID. So there will be a continued effort in looking at what are the standards requirements, where are we with those, and what do we need to do to bridge that gap to get us into a better mode of compliance. We do have an audit coming up in December of 2010. It's two parts. It'll be reliability, which will be our second audit on reliability. But for the first time, there will be an audit on SIPs, which is critical. That's a typo there. It's critical infrastructure protection. And the program for that is somewhere around the 1st of October. WEC will be requesting information, which means we have between now and October to make sure we've got our ducks in a row, our T's crossed and our I's dotted to make sure that we're in a much better position than we had been in the past. So part of what the compliance office needs to do is help get ready for that, and what do we need to do to put the logistics in place. Again, a team of auditors will come in. They have expectations on how the audit will be run. So there's some logistics with that. Some of the other things we need to make sure that get taken care of, as we'll identify from the mock audit. Training of staff is important on how to have conversations with auditors and present information. On top of that will be the continued day-to-day operations of the compliance function, which again is making sure we're doing our self-certification, self-reporting, mitigation plans, getting things compiled and submitted to WEC in a timely fashion. Within the gap analysis and remediation, back in March we did conduct an independent audit from a third party. We submitted information to them based on all the standards and expectations for the reliability component and the SIPS component. And with the results of that, we have some other items that we need to continue to move forward with. In June, we brought in, as is in the board packet, an organization IntelliBind to help do an analysis of where we were with the mock audit and to help us identify where some of the other pieces that we need to get in place for the compliance office. One of the things that was identified in the mock audit and through IntelliBind was that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the area of SIPs, and to compound the issue, version 2 and version 3 will impact where we are. Version 2 became effective April 1st, and version 3 will become effective in October. The expectation is that we need to be compliant with all versions at the time of the audit. So we have a little extra work on our hands to make sure that we are in position to meet those expectations. Additionally, in June, with the help, again, with IntelliBind, knowing that the results of the mock audit and where we need to be, there's an expectation we need to do some rapid development of some key things, particularly the SIPS compliance activities. We expect that we should really look at, WEC has a list of their top 10 most violated standards. We believe it's important that the district is compliant with every one of those top 10 issues. If there are all the previously identified issues, we need to make sure that we're squeaky clean on those. And there's been a few other issues, concerns that have been identified through the mock audit and through the evaluation done by IntelliBind that we also need to make sure that those are taken care of as well. One of the things that came out of the mock audit and part of the assessment from IntelliBind is that there's a need to shore up some of the standard operating procedure documentation, as that can and will become evidence in support of our compliance. And there's areas of opportunity for us to make some improvements in some of those. And again, across all the NERC standards, not just SIPs, there's an expectation that we need to collate and standardize the way the information is available and presented. In our first audit, it was a lot of paper, a lot of folders were brought in. When we did the mock audit, we put out an electronic form, but even then, the mock auditors were saying it was difficult to follow through the flow of the information. So part of what we need to do is, how do we make that an easier process for the auditors to work through? So there's, again, some work that we need to get done in that regard. An action plan specific to the initiatives that I identified before, the compliance office, we really need to get focused and get the internal compliance program, the ICP, put together. That is a document that helps provide guidance for the district on how we will meet compliance activities, and in the event of fines, potentially helps as basically a discount that we're demonstrating that we have a culture of compliance, and if we have a good ICP program in place, that will go away or go a long way in helping us reduce potential fines that could come out of the audit. Key responsibilities is education and training programs. The group is the focal point, is conduit of communication between WEC, NERC, and FERC, and the rest of the district, and we need to make sure that things that are coming out, the district is aware of, well informed, and trained on those activities. Performance measurements. It has been an item that I think the board is well, I don't think, I know the board has addressed multiple times that performance measurements really need to be in place, and so we're dedicating that we will be focusing on how we help put some measurements in place regarding the performance of not just staff but the district itself, and our expectation is that we'll be putting together a scorecard to demonstrate here's how well we're doing, and that will also serve as evidence as we go through the audit processes. And again, reporting methodology and tools, that as things change, we need to make sure that we got the right tools in place and the right processes to make sure that we're doing them effectively and efficiently. We need to complete the operational standard assessments and create action plans to make sure that, again, the operational groups are up to speed with the standards, and that the outstanding SOPs are in place, and we have a plan of action to implement those. Complete the mitigation plans that are required by WEC. And again, that's an ongoing activity. As, again, standards change, we need to make sure that we're putting, as we self-certify and then self-report, if there's identified issues, then we need to create mitigation plans and make sure that we're following through on those. We need to get the SIPS version 2 and 3 documentation complete. And again, we have a short period of time to make sure we get those things done and prepare for that WEC audit. Critical milestones in July. Actually, the date on that has been changed. It is now August, that we have to self-certify for the remaining SIP standards. In July through October is our time frame to get everything ready, because again, we know that 60 days before the audit is when WEC will be requesting the information, and we'll have to send a bunch of stuff back to them for their review. So we've got between now and October to get a lot of this work done. And again, in October, they'll officially request the data. December 7th, a day that hopefully will not live in infamy, we will have the WEC audit on reliability and SIPS compliance. And then in January, we have our next phase of reliability and SIPS certification that will be due. That is the update for the board and the public regarding compliance. One of the things that we do, we will be standardizing this report and making sure that this is a part of periodic ongoing reports to the board. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
No, I just want to make a comment that, as I mentioned before, that whatever our staff needs to make sure that we're in compliance, the board is willing to provide those resources, and I'd like to commend you and the team that you have this time. I think you have some of the brightest people working with you, and I expect good things from your team.
We understand the expectation, and we have an expectation that will meet your expectation.
Okay.
Any questions from the public? Okay, moving on to energy financing update in light of New Morgan lawsuit.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the public. As the board knows, CFO Greg Brokey and I should have been in New York today for the pending bond financing package to build El Centro Unit 3 repower. The reason we're not is because of the lawsuit filed by Mr. Morgan and Mr. Foster, and it's obviously brought a change to our plans. By virtue of its unanimous vote, the board already recognized the importance of this project as one of the key elements in the Energy Department's integrated resources plan. But make no mistake, the delay in entering the bond market will have an economic consequence for the district. In fact, an article in Friday's Bond Buyer, which is an industry newsletter about the lawsuit's possible effects, has and will not be helpful. Two things. Mr. Broking will provide an update on the pending bond financing package and where we go from here. And then Mr. Garber will discuss the legal implications. So, Jeff?
I think Greg's going to go first.
Greg, excuse me. I get you guys mixed up.
Thank you.
Between the time the board approved the two financings in late June and the lawsuit, market conditions had changed, and we were not going to be able to refund the 2003 bonds at the savings that we thought we were going to get. And also because of higher interest rates, we were going to scale back our new money borrowing to pretty much just cover the El Centro repowering or $250 million. And then, as Brian mentioned, since the lawsuit, the impact of the lawsuit is to delay the financing. It's unclear right now how long of a delay it will be. It could be as little as 60 to 90 days or a year or more. The major impact of the lawsuit is investors, or this is my term, will be skittish to invest in bonds where there's a lawsuit hanging over the validity of the bond issue. So until that can get cleared up, it's doubtful whether we'll be able to issue bonds.
The lawsuit was filed apparently on July.
I have a question for Garber. Garber, this new lawsuit, can it be wrapped into the other lawsuit? Because it initially, like what you said, it's about the same thing, that we're borrowing against certain people's asset. Could it be wrapped into and be dealt with quicker?
If you're asking if it's somehow coordinated with the QSA cases, I don't think so. No. That lawsuit was filed on the 2nd of July. It's in the form of a writ of mandate kind of combined with a reverse validation action. Typically when we have energy or water bond financing, we have lawsuits and we report those lawsuits to the underwriters, and the lawsuits are reported in the EOS to the investors. They're typically lawsuits against the district for damages. This is a little bit different. This is a lawsuit that specifically challenges the district's action to authorize at least one of the resolutions and the OS and contracts related to some of the bond financing. And they also challenge the actual contracts themselves. So as opposed to a normal lawsuit, which would be for damages, property damage, personal injury, this is a lawsuit that actually challenges the documents that the board took action to authorize in order to move forward with the financing. We will have to try to find a way of resolving this lawsuit. It could take some time for this lawsuit to go through the normal course, as long as a year, longer, maybe a little bit shorter. I really don't know what's going to happen with the lawsuit. It has not been served yet. The allegations mostly relate to issues on the water side. The plaintiffs allege that as landowners, they have a separate interest and right as a beneficiary of water assets than is different of other residents within the county. They allege that things have happened in the QSA cases that somehow need to be taken into consideration in this case. They allege that they asserted in the QSA cases that one option to address salt and sea environmental issues would be to sell the Coachella energy system that IID maintains, and that is still an option that's somehow being considered or could be considered by the court, and it could have implications with regard to the energy financing. I don't agree with any of those allegations. This energy financing is being secured only by energy revenues. Notwithstanding the fact that I don't agree with the allegations, if they were true, I'm not sure how it would affect the energy financing. But anybody can go to the courthouse, they can put down their $350, and they can file a complaint. And that's what's happened here.
Dr. Broken, do you foresee in the near future a chance to retire those 2003 bonds? It comes down a little bit?
If market conditions change, I think it would be economically feasible if the interest rates came down. But I think even still with the lawsuit being out there, I'm not sure the bonds could be issued until that's resolved.
We're prepared to give an update on the Unit 3 repower, the contracts. I don't know if the board wants to hear about that or not.
Well, I think it's important for the public to be aware that we are going to go forward with our repowering of Unit 3. It's a very important part of the district self-generating our own energy, and I think it's an important part of our balancing authority. You know, Mr. Morgan has a right to file all these absurd lawsuits. He has a right as a citizen. But I'll be damned if the ratepayers are going to end up paying more for their energy in higher costs because it's going to cost us more to repower this Unit 3 and to provide energy for the ratepayers. It's wrong.
Well,
it's absolutely wrong.
I see Mr. Kolk, and it might make sense for Mr. Kolk just to give us some perspective and let us know where Unit 3 fits in with regard to energy issues.
It's my understanding that Unit 3 will still be online by the summer of 2012. Should we have to pay a higher interest rate when ultimately we finance it? Figure each 100 basis points is approximately $2.5 million per year. Should we not be able to finish it, then in the analysis that we did initially to justify El Centro 3, the next best alternatives added anywhere from, say on average, an additional $10 million were roughly 5% additional in costs from 2012 on. So the delay has added costs somewhere on the order, Mr. Broking would be better on this, but somewhere in the order of $2.5 million per year for the next 30 years, for rough number $75 million. And should we not get it in on time, then that's another $5 to $10 million per year, as long as it's delayed.
In addition to that, we currently have contracts with ARB and Siemens to provide the turbines and construct and build the Unit 3 repower. I think at this point, it wouldn't make much sense to terminate those contracts. We would end up paying about $50+ million in order to terminate at this time.
I think the number is closer to 75, according to.
And of course, this is playing it out a little bit more, but if indeed we were to cancel the contracts and to pay the damages on the according to the contract, we would certainly be looking for some kind of remedy to get that money back from whoever we think would be appropriate.
Well, as one director, not repowering Unit 3 is not an option. We're going to go forward with that. We need that for our ratepayers and for our portfolio. We're going to go forward with it. And if ratepayers have to pay more for their energy, they can thank Mr. Morgan for that.
Moving on. Is there any other questions?
Mr. Broken, and both in La Quinta meeting and here, you talked about once we repowered Unit 3, brought it online in 2012, that we would not have any rate increases, I think, till 2013, 2014 would be next time we have a rate increase. And I think you also said we wouldn't have to borrow any more money other than what the bonding we went out for the 399 was about another 30 million. I think you said we'd have to borrow. But my question is, with a lawsuit, whether it's 60, 90 days or 12 months, I know it's going to cost our rates to increase. So we were not going to have any increase until around 2013. What are we just guess-wise looking at for rate increase moving forward here to the future without getting the Unit 3 online on time?
Well, if we don't get Unit 3 online and on time, it'll really depend upon what the market is in the summer of 2012. I think Dave is estimating initially $2.5 million a year up to 10 in later years. And so, you know, a $10 million increase equates to about a 2.5% rate increase.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions from the board? Moving on to governance. Do you have a question?
Yes. Mr. Brokey, with the fact that we were downgraded by Moody and upgraded by Standard & Poor, which is kind of confusing to me, and the fact that we went out for a $399 million bond, with that downgrading, that would affect the savings that we were looking at to refinance the 2003 bonds. Is that correct?
Well, I think we're going to be back to square one where we were before we got the upgrade and the downgrade. I think that the net impact of where we fit in the rate structure will be the same. So I think having the S&P upgrade is certainly it's very unusual in this market to get an upgrade. So I think it surprised a lot of people that we were able to get it. Unfortunately, we're downgraded by Moody's at the same time. But the end result is we basically still have one of them rates us A+ and one rates us AA-, and that's the way it was before we went to them with the rating on this new bond issue.
Well, what I would like to see is for us to offer that bond, remove the refinancing of the 2003 and also the distribution for now, and move forward with the repowering of Unit 3. And I would like to see that brought back so we take action to establish that fact so we can kind of keep track of this. You know, we have a $310 million water bond out there that was dependent upon the iBank, and iBank is defunct. So that bond's kind of, I'd like to see us get that cleaned up too, so we kind of keep track of this. But the Unit 3 has been identified for some time as a major critical component of our energy department. I know I've been a very big critic of it because I always call it the 9 mile per gallon gas hog. And we have an opportunity to fix that that would help stabilize our rates. Plus, I think it protects and improves our assets. So I would like to see that come forward. In the meantime, have we had any discussions with Mr. Morgan and with Mr. Foster to see if we can come to some type of agreement on this? I think it's very important that we move ahead with this because of the local business. I'm thinking in terms of major power users like Plaster City, National Beef, our different coolers and so forth. I think it's very important in the rebuild of Unit 3, and I'd like to see us make an effort to try to get this resolved some way.
If Mr. Morgan and Mr. Foster would dismiss their lawsuit, I'd be happy to talk to them.
I think that would probably be more of a board decision as far as are we along the same lines as Jeff, or
over there smiling.
I mean, what I think I'm along the same lines with Jeff is if he would dismiss his lawsuit. I think I don't know exactly what he would want from the IID other than the other two lawsuits. So I don't know if we can give him anything that we could physically go against our values. So does anybody else have any comments?
No, I would just echo what Director Hanks said about trying to move this Unit 3 repowering forward. If there's another way to finance this thing, then I think we need to take a look at it, because the sooner we get this online, the better off everybody is from a ratepayer standpoint. So I'd appreciate you looking into that and bringing something back to the board like Director Hanks requested.
We will be updating the documents because of the lawsuit. So at some point, you'll be getting a new package that will have to be acted upon again.
All right, thank you.
We're moving on to, let's see, 5 minutes.
Item number
Internal auditing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Tom Kaiser, Internal Auditing. Good afternoon, directors. I have no reports to discuss this afternoon, so I have no comments concerning that. If you have questions concerning my department, this is the time to ask.
I have a request of you.
Yes.
I would like
Oh,
to.
you know what? I apologize, Dr. Hanks. Oscar had a question for Greg on the last subject. I saw him. I'm sorry, Tom.
You want him? Okay.
I don't think the board should really look downgrade Mr. Morgan, you know. Mr. Morgan, like anybody else, if I had his money, if I had money to hire attorneys like he has, I would have sued IID many times already. And I think Mr. Morgan is doing what any American, perhaps in his case and in my case, would do, because we can't blame and castigate Mr. Morgan and say that because of him the power rates are going to be increased. Let's not be so dense to say that. I think what Mr. Morgan is he's trying to reform the system. See, the system that we have needs to be reformed extremely like yesterday. And what he's doing, he's raising issues that the board has made in the past. And as soon as Mr. Morgan does whatever he does, it's not only 380, because I could do that. I could do a lawsuit, but I'm not an attorney. But he can hire somebody like Mr. Maloney and whatever. But I think what he's doing is simply what any American in our country does according to the Constitution. And you may be right, Mr. Pierre Menville, that he has cost our IID a lot of money and millions because of whatever he sued, you know. But he's won, you know, and the reason he's winning, he's laughing all the way to the bank, because ineffective decisions that were made by the IID board and legal counsel, poor advice that you guys have been getting. For example, look at the water transfer. Rudy Maldonado swears that he never voted for some part of that QSA. Mr. Kuhn doesn't remember. And all of a sudden they have a lapse of memory. But we get into personalities and we attack Mr. Morgan. You attack me. And I know two of you, especially the lady from Brawley, for personal reasons. And I don't deal with personalities. I'd like to think that I deal with facts. And I respect you, Mr. Jean Pierre. But you know, when you continually badger and badmouth other people, especially during the campaign that just passed, it doesn't speak very highly of you. You're an example of what you say. And you have to be a gentleman at all the time. You remember when Dora Saikan told you what she told you at the elections department? I was there. And she rightly so spanked you. And I think what you guys should do is listen to what Mr. Morgan is saying. It's the issue, it's not the personality. It's the issue, the substance, the issue that he's raising at the advice of his attorneys. And I think it behooves our counsel here to sit down and try to negotiate, because in the end, who's going to suffer? The rate, us. The poor people. The middle-class people like me and a lot of bureaucrats here and people, we won't suffer. Hey, so what if they double it or triple it? But the one that gets caught at the end are the poor people. Most people here in this county are below the poverty level, and we know it, 40% at times of unemployment. But when you look at Mr. Morgan and the people that he hires, and I know, I think he does a good job. He's not hiring blacks. He's not hiring just white Okies. He hires nothing but Mexican hard workers. And he brings back to the community. So in conclusion, what I'm saying, I salute the issue, not the personality. And let's do that. We're working for the same thing. You guys represent us. We elect you. It's a democratic representative form of government. You guys swore that you would uphold the Constitution of the United States. But yet, behind the scenes, we're vicious. We attack each other like animals. We should stop that and look at the substance. Let's get together, support the home team. Get off of this king baby attitude that I'm better than him and because he's got money or I don't have money. And Oscar's always talking, he doesn't know what I know what I'm talking about. I want to reform the system too. I want to stop what the administration is doing. Look at the morale of the employees today. It's really sad when I hear that this gentleman passed an ordinance or a rule, and he submitted an ordinance saying that you can't get involved and talk to a board of directors. Come on, man, this is too thin. They used to do that in Cuba. They used to do it in China and Russia. This is the USA, God, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What happened to that? Because we have a job. He's bleeding, and I'm blaming him. He's bleeding the power department. And what's going to happen here in 5 years, we're going to be in debt. He doesn't care. He's an outsider. He lives in Temecula. Do you think he cares? No.
Does this have anything to do with the
Yes, it does have
Well,
nothing
he
to
is
do with
talking about Morgan lawsuit.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
I
your
am.
time, I know what I'm saying, but your 5 minutes are coming up.
No, that wasn't a
Oscar.
5-minute thing, though, because you give other people whatever time. This is not on the 5-minute presentation. I have the right to talk. But in conclusion, I think what you gentlemen should do, before you start blaming that he's going to laugh all the way to the bank, sit down and negotiate with a man. If the U.S.
Oscar,
Supreme Court...
just
one more point. If the U.S. Supreme Court said that the state's supposed to pay for the restoration of Salton Sea, and now we're saying, let's sell this, no, it's too expensive. Hey, let's get together, man, and let's do what's right. And quit bickering about...
Oscar, sometimes what's tough up here is to be able to decipher what motives people have. And
well, what motive do you think I have?
Under the disguise,
I'm not going to make a
Oscar,
rat's ass,
I'm
man.
not. Well,
I'm not
I
making
could be
any
speaking
money.
about you. Is that why you're being defensive? But what's difficult is for this board is to decipher what motives
This
we have to look at
lawsuit
issues with the
should have
wide
been
lens,
discussed in executive
with the wide
session,
lens
and it wasn't.
angle. As far as Mr. Morgan, this board has been gives him time to speak, and we don't. I haven't talked about him in
Why
a
do you
negative
think
way.
Mr.
Other than
Abadi's family
we agree to
sued us, too?
disagree
They
that
have the right.
eminent domain lies with this board and not with the landowner, in benefit for all ratepayers.
Yeah.
So we will continue on with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Internal auditing, general matters, governance.
And I think Mr. Hanks was
Oh,
in the
and he
middle of
was, yeah.
something there.
Yes, Director Hanks.
Tom, I would ask that the board join me in asking you to take a look at some of our spending limits, particularly 200,000, 50,000, and the 10,000 limit. These expenditures would be on MWAs, CSPs, contracts, salaries and benefits. That would be what I would consider, and that, and I may be wrong on this, outside of our governance structure, and including those that were funded below the spending authorization but carried over the authorization with an extension of a contract, or projects that were over budget and never brought back to the board.
Well, I can do that if the board approves.
I would like it explained a little more about what it is. Why don't you bring it back to an informational item? And tell us, Director Hanks, exactly what it is you're thinking. I'd like to visualize it, see it.
I think I explained it all I know how. There's been, there was issues raised in the grand jury report, and I want to know, want an explanation what that spending limit is, and if it's being bypassed, where and how, and what policies we can establish to prevent it from happening. Simple as that.
I understand.
How long has the $200,000 spending limit been in place?
About 5 years. That's a guess.
Yeah, it's
approximately
been,
5 years.
Maybe even longer than that. And what was the spending limit before it was increased to the 200,000?
It was 100, then it went to 150, and then 200.
And I'd like
100 goes back to the
information
Shreves
brought back.
days.
Be part of the information as a history of the spending deal.
Well, we'll bring it back, Tom, for next time, so we can. We've got a big agenda, and if we bring it back for the next meeting, we can discuss it more.
You want a
proposal,
an analysis of how the spending limits have increased, say from 100 to 150 to 200, and just as much information as you can get, or
and what areas does it apply to? You know, because you know, if we're talking about the general manager signing warrants for payroll, you know, obviously that's over, and he's not going to bring that back to us. Okay, so I just, you know, I want some clarification so that that's understood.
if you want an analysis of this versus a audit, I can give you an analysis of it. Exactly, you know, in a short summary of where it stands and what we're doing and what.
You know, I'm just looking at, you know, the last couple of years to see where we're at.
Tom, I think what the grand jury was trying to say is that the general manager is trying to circumvent the $200,000 limit by, say, hiring a guy for $120,000 for 6 months, and then he hires him again.
Right.
So I just, you know, everybody wants us to be transparent. I think Brian Brady is trying to do the best job he can with what he has. So, hey, let's put it on the table and talk about it.
Well, right, I can do
I don't
that.
think we got anything to hide around here. We're trying to run a business.
And
I understand that.
I'm not necessarily looking solely at that issue. You know, we have some MWAs that we were involved in, and we have contingencies, and they've gone over, and those haven't been brought back to us. You know, as we move forward, and we keep talking about rate increases and so forth, I've made it very clear. I want to look at these internal controls and these efficiencies before I vote for rate increases.
Well, like I said, it's up to you guys. I can't do anything unless three of five of you say go ahead and do it.
Well, let me ask General Manager something.
I'm fine with you studying it.
Wait, would Tom be the best person to say what's in the policy, or is he the best person to show discrepancies in the policy as far as what's money's being spent?
Either way, I mean, the policies are what they are.
I can
and past practice. You can talk about that. Sure.
Okay, we'll make it. Fine. We'll make
all
it
history.
an item agenda, and we'll all just discuss it.
It makes sense to bring it back to an
Policy.
item
Okay.
if you all want to agree.
All right. Can we take a 10-minute break?
What did he say? So what direction did you give Tom?
Oh, well, we're just bringing it back. Is that? I think
What do you want me to
I
bring
think
back?
Director Body said okay, and I think that's what Director Menville
He
wanted.
was going to look into an analysis or doing, you're going to study or.
Do you want him to go off and do it now, or do you want him to bring back a proposal of what he wants to do?
Or what you think, you know,
That's-
so you make sure
And then we'll
you're
fine-tune
on
it.
the same.
Okay.
Whatever.
Bring back in a proposal if that's okay with the board.
I'm not looking for every expenditure, okay? I just want some clarification what applies.
Why don't I bring back examples of what we're doing, and you guys can look at it and see if you have a problem with it, and if you do, we move forward. If you don't, then that's the end of it.
Okay. That sound good with everybody?
Okay?
Yeah.
I had a deal. I talked, we spoke earlier about some of these contractors, some of this work they've done. Is there a way you can look into it? Because seems like PMO might not be able to track some of those projects they were talking about.
I can, again, that's an audit, and I have 2 or 3 water audits up and coming to start on, and I can start looking at that. It's on the schedule, it's been approved, so that's the avenue that you want to take in the water department.
The 3 that were mentioned, at least. If you can, I don't.
Well, I think would the better one be a project that was done by a contractor and a project that was done by by staff? I mean, as far as whether it was leaking or not, I think they could probably look on both sides of the spectrum as far as whether staff had leaks and contractors. But I think the more important thing is probably cost. The leaks are a different thing because you change your oil every 3,000 miles, you change your brakes every 40. So I think maintenance is going to be a necessity on any project. So I'm not sure. Do you want to do that as far as how much maintenance more does it take for an IID project compared to a contractor? How in depth do you want to go as far as?
Well, I thought PMO would have the answer because they tracked a lot of those MWAs, or were supposed to. But this is outside that. This is an O&M. What I'm looking for is the same thing. Did it come in time, in budget, and is it working? Those were the issues. If the contracts were met and if under budget, fine. But these things, some reports, something was saying that some of these things were over, and then they were done subpar.
Well, I think it's important to look at both. I think because the board needs to look at both, not just at the contractors, and so I think it's important to look at both.
We can look at what they talked about, or we can look at what Mr. Ross has some examples of, and take both sides of the story and document it and give it to you. We don't offer really an opinion. We have recommendations, but
right. Is that okay with the board?
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I'd like to know, if Mr. Ross, when a contractor does work, and say then there's got to be a guaranteed time that thing's not going to leak or something's not right with it, they got to come back and fix it.
Generally, it's
somebody around here knows that if it's they're fixing it at their own nickel or it's coming against us or whatever. There's got to be something in place that goes back and dings those guys if they didn't do it right.
Well, I'd have to review IID's contracts, but generally it's like a year guarantee, and any fixes are on the contractor.
Well, again, it's a standard contract. If the contract says they have to do certain work and meet certain specs and they don't meet them, then they're in breach of the contract. Now, I can't tell you how often that happens. That's something that somebody's got to look into.
That's what Mr. Kaiser's going to be looking into.
All right.
Thank you. Bring it
Okay.
back.
Do you have anything for general water?
Well, just a quick one is that it was asked last time what our underrun estimate is for the end of this year, and according to the Bureau, the current number would be 218,426 acre-feet, which is slightly less than what we had last year. So, and it does seem to be trending in a positive direction at this point. So we'll just keep tracking it month by month.
Okay, that's ends for water. Unless you guys have questions for him. We will take a 10-minute break and resume with energy. Director Mendoza's on her way back to her seat. We'll start with energy, general matters.
Where's Dr. Koch? Oh, Dr. Koch, he's right in front of you.
Good afternoon, directors. I have two things. The first is tomorrow we're going to do our first transaction with CFE, just trying it out. It's only going to be 2 megawatts for 1 hour, but it'll be coming over the 230 kV line from CFE to Imperial, and it's just to make sure that all the transmission paths, codes, and everything else fit in between ourselves, WEC, CFE, and others. So that'll be the first one, 2 megawatts, $30 a megawatt hour plus ISO cost of roughly $6. From that point on, we'll start. Yes, sir.
So what's the delivered cost then?
$36 a megawatt hour.
36?
Yes, sir.
3.6 cents. Yeah.
Yes. it's supposed to be coming from Sierra Puerto, but CFE doesn't really track that, and so we're working with them to ensure that it comes through from just the renewable site. This is something that we found kind of interesting. Carl Stills and others from G-Therm were out looking for land for the G-Therm experimental geothermal site. And in doing that, here at our managed marsh, some of you remember that we are doing satellite and aerial surveys of our lands to see what type of geothermal resources we have. Well, I'd like to step back here a little bit to, on March 27th, before the earthquake, the land had a high temperature of about 66 degrees up here. Okay, so the water temperature was 66 degrees in the managed marsh. Okay, on 5/5, the water temperature had increased to 84 degrees. Oops. But on 6/9, the water temperature had increased to 120. It actually had decreased because on 5/31, roughly 5 weeks after the earthquake, the water temperature had gotten up to 186 degrees.
Because of the earthquake?
That's what we're assuming, that the water temperature had gone from 66 degrees up to 185 degrees and is now dropping down to 120 degrees. And
Make it a little tough on all them birds, huh?
I don't know what happens to a bird when it lands in 185 degree water. I assume that it's uncomfortable.
Parboiled.
He doesn't land.
Ouch.
But we are watching this land now. The areas around this land are areas that several of the geothermal companies are attempting to lease, and we actually can reach into the underground anomaly through slant drilling. But we now know for sure, and this is just what we're doing with all of the western farmlands, all of the district's trust lands, trying to ensure that we can identify any of the geothermal resources, again, through this satellite imagery and aerial overflights and some on-ground surveys. But this is what we're attempting to identify. Where are the geothermal resources? And this then would make our adjacent land much more valuable when we go to lease it out or sell it, should that be the case, to any of the geothermal developers. So, yes, sir.
Question. I'd heard that in the managed marsh, is there bubbling coming up from the
That's
underground?
why we went and pulled out the satellite images of this. It was bubbling. We believe that was methane being released, but we have not done a air quality or any type of a survey at that point yet, because it had stopped bubbling by the time we got people out there.
Just north of the marshlands, there's an abandoned well on that piece of property.
Geothermal well, yeah.
They're injection wells, though, aren't they?
Dr. Cloak, this hot water, has it killed the vegetation that was planted?
No, ma'am.
No, they survived the hot water?
Yes, they have. I assume it is probably something like the BP marsh. There's probably some that's been destroyed, but the land itself is still there. This picture was taken afterwards, probably in June sometime. So you can see there's some brown, but I don't know if this is, so if you just move back to the other, you can see that the brown areas.
Dave, there's some areas not too far from there where CO2 comes up through the...
Okay, that's...
Mud pots and...
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's not too far from the mud pod area.
Yeah.
But we definitely know at this point that this is a good geothermal area. When the ground temperature and the water temperature is 185, there's probably something significant 200 or 300 feet underneath it. So that's all I have on this unless there's any questions. Okay.
Thank you.
And
Are there
you're-
any questions
You're up on the next.
for energy general matters that are not on the 4 items? Next one. Moving on to number 7, Yucca Power Plant.
That's Dave.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to introduce the concept of, at the next board meeting on the 27th, we're going to be coming back with a series of 14 contracts that, for the first time, will allow the district to take physical control of natural gas supplies to the Yucca Power Plant in Yuma. Currently, APS purchases over the Yuma lateral that comes from El Paso down through the Phoenix area where APS has built several new power plants, and then into Yucca where APS has added 2 more LM6000s, the 49.9 megawatt plant. We are getting ready to contract from Ehrenberg down to Ogilvie. This is the first portion of the line. Then over a portion owned by Semper and Shell from Ogilvie to Algodones, and then the Yuma portion from Algodones over here to Yuma. This contract has taken us now about 15 months to negotiate. It has contracts with APS, TransCanada, Energy de France, EDF, the Mexican government, the U.S. Department of Energy, and others. And all the different contracts have to work together with each other. As part of this, we're going to be bringing, again, a new operating agreement.
Bless you.
There's been no operating agreement for Yucca in place since 1997. There's a backup fuel agreement under which APS would provide gas to Yucca in the event of a catastrophic outage. It is very expensive. We hope we never have to use that. There's a construction agreement whereby APS will construct roughly 1,000 feet of pipeline from the TransCanada meter and pressure regulation stations to the Yucca plant. We've been going back and forth. Every time we turn around, APS gives us a different price, but we finally have agreed to a price of approximately $2.05 million. TransCanada, we have 5 different contracts, fuel transportation agreement for the portion from Ehrenberg down to the California-Mexican border, and then from Algodones to the Yucca plant. These are the 2 actual gas transportation agreements. There's a operating balancing agreement that sets the terms and conditions for nominating and scheduling gas actually on an hour-by-hour basis, which is why we're going to contract that scheduling obligation out. A meter facility statement whereby TransCanada will put in a metering station for us, and then dual pressure regulators. The pressure coming off the TransCanada line is about 900 pounds per square inch. We need it at 35. We could put in a single pressure regulating station, but if we put in one and it failed, we'd have 900 pounds of pressure going into a plant designed for 35 pounds of pressure. That would be bad. So we're putting in an additional pressure regulator to cost about $400,000. And then an agreement necessary to get into their website so we can see how much gas we're using on a moment-by-moment basis. We're going to be entering into a NASB contract, which is the North American Energy Standards Board standard enabling agreement, and then EDF will be acting as our scheduling agent. They're doing this essentially at 0 cost to us. For the right to sell us gas, both fixed long-term gas and short-term gas. And then a number of other miscellaneous agreements, an agency delegation form for both the United States and Mexico. One's handled through the U.S. Department of Energy, the other's handled through the Mexican government, and then an import-export application. The total cost of the actual construction on this is slightly under $5 million. We hope to have all the construction done, the meter, tube, dual regulation, and pipeline, and tie into the Yucca station by approximately late October or November of this year. Hopefully we can get it done, but there's some long lead time items that need to be ordered. And once that happens, we have two benefits. First, it will reduce our annual cost by only about $500,000 per year. That when you look at the additional costs that we're paying to TransCanada for gas supply, which will be slightly over $3 million a year compared to the roughly $1.7 million per year that we currently pay APS, that by itself is a loss. On the other hand, we can purchase gas about 40 cents per decatherm cheaper on the market than we can from APS. Put the two together and we come out slightly over $500,000 per year ahead based on current cost. I should also point out that APS is not charging us a higher price of gas by attempting to do something wrong. They're hamstrung in a sense by current FERC rules that require that the shipper have own the gas, that we cannot transport our gas over APS's lines. The shipper must have title to the gas. So APS has been charging us their average weighted cost of gas. It's just that we can purchase it much cheaper on our own. More importantly, it'll allow us to physically hedge gas prices. So one of the things we're doing with EDF is looking at about 6,000 decatherms per day for 18 months, and that cost would be just slightly over $5 if we were to execute the contracts today. I'll execute the contract, the gas purchase contract, sometime after the board approves this and prior to the in-service date of the additional construction. But all this will be presented to you in great detail on the 27th.
Are there any questions from Mr. Broken?
Thank you. I have one question. This is the same deal that was brought before us, I think, 2-3 years ago?
It wasn't 3 years ago. We have been trying to negotiate a gas or a operating agreement for the Yucca plant for about 13 or 14 years. When Mr. McCann and I came here, there was a draft, and we read the draft, and as part of the draft, APS said you have 2 years to find your own gas deal. And the two of us looked at it and said, wait a sec, there's no other pipeline. If we give this up, how are we going to get gas to this facility? Oh, APS wants additional water rights, and they need the pipeline capacity on the existing line to serve their plants. And what they were attempting to do in that original agreement was, in effect, steal the gas rights from us to use it on their plant and tell us, good luck, carry the gas in each day on your back or something. We don't care. It's not our problem. Since then, we've been negotiating. It's taken this long. You're dealing with 3 different nationalities, Canada, the United States, Mexico, plus EDF, Énergie de France, is 85% owned by the government of France. So we're really dealing with a whole number of entities that each have to buy off, and many of these contracts have to be signed by 3 or 4 different companies, such as an agency agreement has to be signed by ourselves, a Mexican agent, TransCanada, and EDF, so that all of us agree to live within the terms of the same contract. It's been hard putting these things together. But it's done at this point. All the final drafts have been approved by all the different attorneys, and we're ready to bring it to the board for its approval.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to number 8, major work authorization covering the Brawley Bypass Stage 3 project.
Mr. Escalera. In fact, you have you've got 3.
The next 3, yes, thank you. Director Sanchez, Board. As you well know, the state of California has been building the SR 786, which is a 4-lane highway, serviceway. They're on their final stages now, and they required us to move some the utilities in some facilities. So what this is an MWA for us to go ahead and move forward in relocating our facilities in the last phase of the highway work for Caltrans. As you can see, it's located just north of 78. That's kind of where their work has stopped. This will carry us all the way up to Hoveley Road, and then there's some work on Fredericks Road. This is a long list. I won't go through it, but basically the work consists of relocating some fiber optics. There is locating 2 steel poles of our 92 kV line. There's relocating of some 34.5 transmission line and some 12.5 distribution circuits that'll be built under the new steel poles. There's also some work that needs to be done in the substation and also some switch work, which is not really part of the project, but it's in here because we want to make sure that it gets coordinated with this project. Also, there's 2 circuit distributions that need to be relocated. One is approximately 3,400 feet. The other one is almost 1,200 feet. Again, this is all be coordinated with the division offices and the troubleshooters. Basically, what it is because the Caltrans is actually requesting us, we have prior rights on utility easements. Caltrans will reimburse us 100% of the project. There is a little bit of a carrying charge because typically it takes about 90 days to start billing the state. There is a small portion of the project that will be the responsibility of the district. It's about $10,000, and that's basically just the calculated salvage value of the equipment and poles that will be relocated. As you can see, the project is $1,789,559. The state will reimburse us for all of that, other than the $10,000 salvage value of the equipment in question. And that really is kind of the presentation.
Mr. Escalera, do you intend to use our staff, our employees, or are you going to contract this out? This is actually contracted out. It's transmission work. We typically don't do steel work. So this one is slated to be contracted out. To whom? It's whoever gets it. We have 2 contractors now that are doing work for the IID. Traditionally, it's been Irby, and then we also have Wilson, who's doing the K and KS line that's very well capable at, and whoever else would want to bid for it. It'll go through the normal bidding process. Our line crews are actually already scheduled out, Director Mendoza, with other capital work that we're doing, so this is how we kind of resource the rest of the year out.
Okay. Number 9, major work authorization, Cumberland Prairie Valley's distribution project.
This is, let me catch up with you if I may. This is a capital CS project that we would like to bring forward. This is in the city of Brawley. It is circuit B722. It basically, here's the location that it's on the west side, or the east side, I'm sorry, of Brawley. It's a heavily populated area. It's in the alleyways. It is part of our ongoing capital replacement for aging infrastructure, particularly the distribution. The overhead wire is well over 40 years. It is drawn hard copper. It doesn't suit well with some of the storms that we've been had. One of the things that we want to do is bring it up to code by make it both in IID standards and California General Order 95, I'm sorry. The new wire that we are installing has a steel reinforced carrier wire, which will act better in the winds that we've had. Some of the problems, the outages that we've been having in some of the older neighborhoods with the winds that we just had past the last few months is that the hard-drawn copper, as it gets old, it gets brittle, and it's not susceptible to breakage with the movement of the wind. With the new standard that we've had in line for about 18 years, that's greatly reduced. This is just two pictures of what the facilities look like now. We are aided in the fact that these are alleyways, so we'll be able to work somewhat in the clear. There's still, of course, involves fences and backyards that we have to coordinate with the landowners. Once the project's approved, we go ahead of the projects, notify all of the landowners that we will be in. We try to make arrangements, help them move so that we kind of lay out what areas we need cleared, that may impact their property, and try to lessen the impact to the landowner. It is the number 4 of our capital library for 2010. These 20 projects have been run through our risk assessment matrix. We have also an MWA for number 1, number 2, and 3. I haven't brought over to you because they're actually more complex projects, and we're doing some more in-depth engineering on that. But it is number 4 of the 20 that has been identified for the 2010 budget. And
will this also be contracted out?
This one, I believe, is going to be done by IID forces. I think it's slated to be IID. We've got a lot of work coming up, so we're trying to make sure that we can resource both projects that we're going on. We also have a pole replacement program we're still working on, and then we've got our own going business.
Thank you. Moving on to P6646, covering Imperial Valley Distribution Project in Brawley.
This is another project that has been identified in the city of Brawley. This is for circuit, or actually just part of circuit B1513, excuse me. It's very similar to the other part. This is actually adjacent to it. It is also located on the east portion of Brawley. This is a picture of it. It's actually a little bit more. It's actually almost twice as long as the MW that was mentioned prior to this one. Some of the justification, of course, is the same. It is an ongoing project replacement in trying to upgrade and bring our distribution system, at least on the overheads, to the new standards in California General Order 95. Again, it is replacing the hard-drawn number 6 copper with a new overhead wire that has steel reinforcement that allow us to withstand, again, not only the winds, but we want to take note that in all of the earthquakes that we've had, the distribution overhead system has actually reacted quite well, and we'd like to think that is partly due to some of the replacement programs that we have, including this and, of course, our pole replacement program. This, again, is 2 pictures. We are aided by having an alley. One of the things that most of the projects we find in Brawley is that we have alleyways. In some of the other cities, we're not as lucky, particularly Calexico. Most of the properties are back-to-back, which really tends to be difficult projects to do. Again, this is actually rated number 1. Partly is due to the risk. It was when we looked at the population density per 100 feet. This actually comes out the houses. It is a very dense populated area, and when we did the matrix, and it pushed it all the way up to number 1 of all of the 20 projects that we've slated for 2010. Again, any questions?
Will this be done in-house or?
This one, I believe we're still debating. We're trying to figure out with the timelines. These are actually, we were hoping to have brought these back in front of the board about 2 months ago, and we're looking at how the resourcing finishes out. So we're either slated to go in-house or we will bid them out on the bidding process.
Okay.
And these will all come back on the 27th.
Yes, and I do want to mention that they're all budgeted for in the 2010 budget.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the consent item.
I move to approve with taking out number 14 for discussion or action.
Second.
The first and second, please vote. Moving on to the action item agenda, and what we'll do at this time, if it's okay with the board, we'll put Daniel from 21 up to, so he doesn't have to wait another hour or 2.
Sure, this one will be quick.
It's item 21, review of proposed funding agreement with Calexico County Enterprise Zone.
Good afternoon, directors. I'll be brief. I'm here to request the board's approval to enter into the attached addendum to the joint powers agreement for the Calexico County Enterprise Zone. Although IID currently has a representative on the Calexico County Enterprise Zone, it is not currently a member. The Calexico County Enterprise Zone has requested that IID become a member of the Joint Powers Authority and commit to annual funding. In order to make that happen, it was necessary to create an addendum to the existing JPA agreement. Imperial County Council has drafted the attached addendum. Legal brought the addendum before the board at the last meeting for direction as to whether or not the addendum was acceptable to the board. The board's direction was that the addendum should provide for similar membership terms as with the IV Enterprise Zone. The term of the agreement, the addendum to the JPA, is for 11 years. Early withdrawal is available on 2 years written notice to the Calexico County Enterprise Zone. A similar provision for early withdrawal is also contained in the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone agreement. The Calexico County Enterprise Zone has an annual operational budget of $180,000. If the district becomes a member, the operational expenses would be split 3 ways between the County of Imperial, City of Calexico, and IID. Therefore, the district's maximum contribution to the Calexico County Enterprise Zone annually would be $60,000. There's a similar cap in the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone agreement. Our recommendation is to approve and execute the attached addendum.
Is this the same as we have with the Brawley Enterprise Zone?
Very similar. The agreements are very, very similar.
It's an annual contract, annual commitment?
That's correct.
I don't remember what the term and the termination is on the Brawley, that's all.
Is there a termination?
It was for 15 years, and it started about 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't know what the termination is, if it's 2 years or longer.
Well, both terminate in 2021. One terminates in March.
No,
other
the
in
early
October.
termination.
Oh, the early termination is 2 years. Yes, both are 2
Right.
years.
Do a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second. Is it first and
I have
second?
one question.
Go ahead.
You said that the member, IID member, is not a member of the enterprise zone. How did you state that?
We have a representative on the board, but we're not, the IID as an entity is not an actual member. We haven't committed to annual funding. So what we'd be doing with this addendum is becoming a member of the Calexico County Enterprise Zone, and we'd have an obligation to pay annual dues as well.
Because he's on the board as a JPA, and he's been voting.
Well, I understand that, but when we checked it, we found out that
Okay, that's all for the question.
Hold on, well, you go. Okay.
There's a first and a second, please vote. Do you have a question?
Well, it's after the fact. So for the Brawley Enterprise Zone, we don't have an annual commitment to them like this one? Oh, we do. That's.
I think we do. We haven't looked into the Brawley. We can pull it and find out
Yeah,
what the commitment
we
is.
have a 60,000 annual commitment for 15 years, but right now we're paying like 43,000, but it's not to exceed 60,000 a
It's
year. And
not
that's-
to exceed
That's 3 ways,
60.
the county and the city of Brawley and the IID.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Great.
Thank you.
Number 18, general manager compensation, act on issue at this time.
Yes, I'll handle that.
So does this action item, once it's taken, does it automatically void the other one, and then, or do we have to take a separate action item to actually void and then do it again, or should we just do it and then?
Do you want me to give you some background, or you want me to just give you the answer to that question?
Give us back.
The answer to the question is, at my recommendation on the bottom of page 222 is the method that I think you can use to achieve the result. You make a motion to declare the action from the 15th to be null and void. You instruct staff to revise the minutes consistent with your action. Then you take up the issue of compensation in open session, take action as deemed appropriate. That would be my recommendation for the way that you cure this issue.
So, looking for a motion then?
I think the first step is take a motion to deem the previously reported action from closed session null and void, and to instruct staff to fix the minutes. And then you should take up this issue of compensation.
But I'll move for approval to declare that the action taken in closed session to give a compensation bonus to general manager is null and void, and then instruct the staff to revise the minutes for the June 15, 2010 meeting.
Is there first and get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there first and a second? Please vote. Now, at this time, do we have a motion for bonus and compensation?
What I would ask, there was 3 motions made, and I would ask that those be reported out, what those 3 motions, so that the public has an idea of what we discussed leading up to the 3rd item.
I think it's up to the board. I don't think there can be reported out because motions don't get reported out of closed session. What gets reported out of closed session is action. If the board wants to discuss whatever they want to discuss, that's fine. But I can't do that because it's not consistent with my understanding of what happened.
In the recommendation, Mr. Garber, the last sentence, you say the board should then take up the issue of the general manager's compensation anew in open session, which is now, correct?
Right. The board took that issue up, and in retrospect,
I'd like to make
it
a
shouldn't
motion that Mr. Brady, Dr. Brady's base salary stays at $275,000, and we give him a 5% bonus.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. Please vote. There's open for discussion. If the action in closed session was void, I don't know how we can, it's probably moot, so to speak, to discuss what the action was taken in closed session. We have the opportunity to discuss it now in open session.
Yeah, I would just, again, reiterate that I disagree with counsel. My understanding what the definition that's included in the Brown Act of action is.
Action is defined under Government Code Section 54952.6. Action taken means a collective decision made by a majority of the members of a legislative body, a collective commitment or promise by a majority of the members of a legislative body to make a positive or negative decision, or an actual vote by a majority of the members of a legislative body. So the only action would be a motion that was voted by a majority. That action was reported out.
Even if there was a majority vote to oppose to the action.
That's not a majority vote. If one of you makes a motion and it's seconded and 3 people vote no, there's no action. That's the part that I know it sounds like I don't understand how that's action. That happens all the time in open and closed session. It's not action. It's a motion, but it's not action. I can't stop the board from reporting whatever they want to report, but as the board's counsel, I can't report action that's not action, or report activity in closed session under that circumstance. The board is free to express whatever it wishes to express.
We have a first and a second. Is there any more discussion on pay for our general manager, other than that what was already reported through the newspaper 3 weeks ago or a month ago?
Vote.
Please vote. Okay. We don't have well, does a board member like to make a new motion And perhaps would any of the board members, whether what was reported in the newspaper, like to discuss the change of vote? Is there a new motion for compensation? Then I move on to the next item, and we'll put this for closed session on July 27th for performance review. Would that be the right?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Performance review, because I'm not sure if that's in public or private, as far as
I
if
got
there's
that
no,
part. I don't understand what you're asking.
as far as employee performance.
Employee performance was correctly discussed in closed session. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue of employee compensation has to be discussed in open
So
session.
I'd like to do employee performance closed session, July 27th.
Oh, okay.
There was no action taken today, and there is no new motion on the floor for compensation. So I think it'd probably be important to have a closed session employee performance.
After the close of this meeting, to continue?
No, next on the 27th.
Okay.
Okay, and then I got a question.
Go ahead.
On the previous action that we took, under your recommendation that we declare the action taken in closed session dealing with the compensation, and that'd be null and void, that we voted to null and void that, so that thing is
It never
that's
happened.
a dead issue.
It never happened.
Yeah, it's a dead issue. Okay.
Okay. Moving forward with the general services. No, I'm sorry. Approval of board minutes of the 19th.
I'll move to approve. The 15th, they're doing it one at a time.
Can we do both of them or one at a time?
I was not here on the 22nd. I'm going to abstain for the
Okay.
22nd. I second the motion for the 20, for the 15th.
And your approval of the board minutes on the 15th is subject to the previous action you just took to direct staff to correct those minutes to reflect your current action.
Okay.
So they're included. If we vote for the minutes, then that's already taken care of?
Well, no. I assume that Gloria's going to fix the minutes to reflect your current action. So you're
Right.
approving
Take it off
these
and not do
minutes
nothing?
as corrected.
Yeah, as corrected. Okay.
There will be nothing reported out. It'll
Okay.
just say discussion in closed session, and that there'll be nothing reported out.
Should we take action right now or wait till the change is made?
I think you can take action conditioned on your previous instruction. You already instructed her to fix the minutes. Or if you want, it's up to you. You can take action on the other minutes and say, bring those back, I want to see them.
So I can make a motion to approve a special meeting of June 15th, 2010, with the minutes as corrected as of today, correct?
Correct, which
Okay, that's
means
my
that
motion.
on page,
I think
Number eight.
Director Abadi
Well, you already made a
made the
motion?
motion.
Yeah.
I seconded,
I
yeah.
didn't
There's a
hear
first
you.
and a second. Please vote. On the 19th regular meeting, June 22nd,
Move for approval.
there's a first. Can I get a second?
Second.
There's a second. And please vote. Now we're moving forward to the consider establishing a variable rate for the energy cost adjustment, 239.
Yes, Mr. President, members, this is put on the agenda at the request of Mr. Hanks.
Yeah, on November 30th, 2009, we had a motion and a second to float the ECA and adjust the base rate according to the budget. And that was tabled, and I've asked that it be brought back up for consideration again.
Oh, I remember I asked about that back in April. I think we were waiting for the audit report, which is supposed to come in June or July of the ECA.
I would like Mr. Broking to give us his recommendation or
Well, my understanding, a few months back, the board asked for an update in the third quarter of this year, and that's what I was planning on doing, is bringing back the ECA issue at the board's direction.
What is that?
Probably be in September. with a various set of options to choose from.
I'm willing to wait till September.
I think we had this discussion. We were in La Quinta, I think. Is that where this happened?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay. But we did this last year. There was 3 options, and none of those got approved. And this kind of thing's just been hanging around. I've been trying in years past to try to get this thing back to the variable components it was collected in '04. And so it's a true ECA where it fluctuates and tracks the market. So that is my motion, is to release the ECA and have the same components it was collecting back in '04, before it was levelized. That's my motion, the same one I've made 3 times before, twice before.
Well, wait. Wasn't there a motion? That same one though, wasn't it your motion to take out something because there was something in that ECA that shouldn't have been collected? So I'm confused. I think we took action on that on the 6 or 07, that there was something in the ECA that should have never been in there to move it over to base rate. So are you rescinding that resolution or direction?
No, in '04, before '06 was fixed, the ECA was fluctuating. And it had components been identified, I think once in '02, then it changed again in '04, and by internal audits in '04. And now, what were the components that were in the ECA? It is those components that were identified, and the way it was working in '04 is my motion.
Wasn't there something in that ECA that was taken out? No, you guys weren't here. Nobody was here other than the board members.
I got a question. See whether I second this. When do you want to implement it?
In order for discussion, there has to be a second on the motion. Point of order.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion for discussion. All right. Now I'm going to ask Director Abadi, when would you want to implement it? I'm sure they'll need time to calculate it.
I think the discussion we had before, when I made this, I think a year ago, was quarterly. I don't know if it was working monthly. That's what we were, back then, that's what I was asking, how fast could it track? I think it should be left, released right away. But I'm not sure if you guys were tracking it. Maybe Sandra knows a little bit more. Were you on every month, or was it quarterly? Because my understanding from different presentations, you can do it a couple ways. I don't think it should be any longer than quarterly.
We also have a provision of the rate stabilization fund. And it's my understanding there's 53 million in there.
Yes.
It probably needs, we'll probably need a recommendation how much where it's at this year. We set a goal, of 100 million for rate stabilization?
That is the board established goal.
All right, we have a motion.
I got a question. What was your recommendation to come back in September and take a look at this thing?
Yes, the direction I was given was to come back in September with other options.
Yeah.
And
I
for
feel
the
more
board to
comfortable
decide.
doing that, waiting till you come back in
I'm
September
not
and
against,
looking at the numbers.
taking a look at things. This thing's got to float. I know the Director of Body's been trying to get this thing to float for a long time. We're in the summer months right now. Preferably, I'd rather have Mr. Broking come back with something in September, and if it looks like we need to float it, we float it. I'm not against that, and I think Director Hanks brings up some good points about taking a look at the rate stabilization instead of hurriedly and voting on this thing right now. I think we need to put a little bit of intelligence into our thinking here, because we are dealing with a ratepayer. So I would like to take a look at this thing in September.
Well, from my perspective, if you can come bring it sooner, bring it sooner.
Okay.
And two, I can't remember. It was like 3 years ago. I think we took something out of that ECA because we didn't want to create a slush fund for management. So to go till I find out what was that, maybe if you, Dr. Brady, if you can have Gloria look back at the minutes and we can what was that discussion? 2006, I believe, or 2007. and then our next meeting or the meeting after that.
Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second. Please vote.
If I might.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, based upon our discussion of, I don't know what it was, item number 2 about El Centro number 3, we have $75 million in contract commitments. And I would certainly wouldn't want to do anything precipitously. I mean, 60 days from now, the lawsuit, we may be much clearer on the lawsuit, but taking a quick drop, if that were to happen in the electric rate, I think wouldn't be, in my opinion, wouldn't be prudent.
I
But
agree with
again,
you.
it goes to, say, September. We should know a whole lot more at that point.
I'd like to add to that. The resolution that we passed back in March 2007, when we levelized this, it said if during the years 2007, 2008, the under-recovered fuel energy costs are fully collected and there would result a potential over-recovery for the 2-year period, staff will request board approval of changes in the ECA rate revenues to give the customer appropriate credit through the ECA rate revenues. Since that time, we have added in the rate stabilization fund. But the general public is expecting at some point in time get closure to all this, and that's what I'm looking for personally is a closure. The components that make up the ECA must be executed exceedingly well. I think we're doing that now, and we need to continue to do that to be competitive. But we also need to monitor it, and that's why I would like to see the ECA as a component that we've we've identified, and we know. But we also know that we have a problem in the base rate, and we have an obligation to keep the organization stable, and we need to address that. And I think one of the ways that we, moving forward, where we address that so that we can meet our debt service and we can also move on with our project, is that we need to look at that base rate, see what we have in the budget, set the rates accordingly there so that we can monitor these expenditures. Over the years, going back to 2000, and I've taken the time to do a lot of research, and there would be times whenever capacity would be moved in, moved out, and I don't know how you monitor. How do you do your planning so that you get a handle on these if you're moving it back and forth? You also have issues of our generation, where we buy and we budget for generation, and sometimes if we're not generating, we buy purchase power. Now that goes over, that expense is now becomes part of the ECA expenditures, but we have money budgeted over in the base rate to cover that that's not flowing with it. And I'd like to see us get this all cleaned up so that we monitor it, move forward. It's well defined, and I'd like to, at some point in time, come back with our energy balancing sheet so we can tell if we're up to speed. We saw what happened with the net metering, where we were at there. We had an issue. And I don't know how you monitor these things if we don't have it clearly defined so that the board can monitor it, so we can budget according to what we need. And we know we're on solid ground, solid internal controls, and set the rates accordingly. That's where I'm heading. The energy balancing sheet is again, like what we talked earlier about compliance audits, is a performance indicator. And we need those things to get this thing squared up. It's not fair to the ratepayer, it's surely not fair to our CFO to be constantly wondering where the dollars are going to come from, and have a system that we put together at the time was just a matter of survival. We made the moves that we made to save this organization, okay? And we have brought in experts who have made some major adjustments, major changes that's got this thing going. And I think the indication of what's that we put into the rate stabilization fund is an indication of that. And I'm not proposing that we get on shaky ground, but we just put it into a place where we can monitor it, and that the public trust is regained in us, that we're monitoring this thing, that we're not commingling the money, and that we're spending it in the proper fashion. And that's what I would like to see when you come back. If you would bring us back on the rate stabilization, kind of an idea of where we're at for this year. Okay, are we ahead of the game? Are we behind? Do we get to increase this? And if so, is that money available for us, for example, to use on the Unit 3? If it is, then we can pay ourselves the interest. When I say pay ourselves, pay our ratepayers the interest, because that money is restricted. But the board can take action to use it. But if we do, then we need whatever we were going to pay to a bond company, interest rate, we need to pay back into this fund. And the ratepayers should take advantage of that. I don't want to see put you in a tight spot. I know you're sweating bullets right now, okay? By the way, we had a conversation about this, so it's not like he didn't know it was coming. But I'd like to see us get to that point, okay? And I'd like to see that information brought to us, whether it's September or whenever, because it's going to take time to make the adjustments. But whatever we're short in the rate stabilization fund, for example, let's say if we're at 80 million in the rate stabilization fund, and the goal is to get it to 100, we don't have to do it all in 1 year. We can calculate into the ECA the amount that we want to put into the rate stabilization fund, and get this organization well, get our bond ratings where they need to be. And I'd like to tell all those bond people to take a leap sometime. I'd like to see us get to a point where we're not having to borrow the money to operate. But that's where I'd like to see this go. But I'd like to see it where we're monitoring. We know exactly where we're at. If the rates go, the fuel costs go up, and then we may have to draw on this. But we can also adjust the base rate. The base rate, and I'm going to throw a couple rocks here. The base rate probably hasn't been touched in what, 15, 20 years?
It's been a long time.
Okay, and whenever costs that were going up in the ECA and everybody's power bill was going up, some of those components would be moved off to the base rate, and politically it was a decision made based on politics, not on the rate structure. And I'd like to see us get away from that so that we can financially make this a strong financial organization, and we have the proper controls in place. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oscar, did you have a direct question to Director Hanks, or in general? If it's in general, I'm gonna let Director Abadi go first. Is it a question directly toward?
It's a question for you.
Okay, then I'll let Director Abadi go first.
On the rate stabilization, I know we want to get there, but that can always be added to the base rate. To the base rate, I think is depending on what a quarter percent, a percent, what it would end up collecting. Variable components in the ECA is just that. to track the variable and unknown costs that are associated with the markets. And so that's why I'm standing by my motion. I don't want to wait till September.
I understand what you're saying, Director Abadi, but I think the prudent thing to do is to wait till September when Mr. Brogan brings us back all the numbers and all that, and at that time make a thoughtful decision. That's why I'm not going to support your motion, because I think we should wait until September for the proper numbers.
Well, I'll remind you, in '09, we waited till September. Or in '08, we got to September, and now we're back to another September.
What you're saying is, we want to float this, but he can bring us the numbers where we're at in '09, and then we can make whatever adjustments.
We can make other adjustments.
We want to be on record that we're going to correct this ECA, but at the same time, we're going to deal with whatever we have to do in the base rate too.
And I want to be on record too, is that in '08, I decided not to float it because I decided to use cash reserve instead of raise rates on the people of Imperial County. Oscar.
We're on the issue on number 21, right?
Yes.
On the ECA?
Yes.
21's.
So you got a question for me, or is it in general?
For you. Well, a consideration.
Oh.
I want to remind you, Mr. Sanchez, that the campaign slogan was to float that ECA. Back in the public forums when you spoke, you were in favor of floating it?
My term is not up. I have 4.5 years.
No, I know that.
So
But we're talking about time.
Okay.
And you were talking, when you spoke at forums and you were quoted in the paper, and I talked to you, you said that you were in favor of floating. I hope you vote for the motion though, because I don't think it's gonna make any difference if we wait till September or we wait next year. Either you're gonna vote or you're not gonna vote, you know? And I think you're in favor of floating, and I hope you vote. I just wanted to remind you that. Period. Thank you.
Oscar, are you in favor of a slush fund for management?
No?
Well, from what that's why for me, I think I like to wait and see what that motion was, what was taken out of the ECA and put back into the base rate. From what I understand, the motion right now is to go back before we got on board, because we were the board members who took that particular issue out of the ECA and put it into the base rate. So we go back prior to when I first sat on this board, I'm putting something into an ECA that would, quote unquote, give the opportunity for management to have a slush fund. So
That's all I just wanted to remind you.
Let me add a little note of clarification there. And I've been on the board six months longer than you have. We haven't moved any components in that last 4.5 years into the base rate or into the ECA. This board hasn't made any motions to do that. We did, agree and took action to establish the rate stabilization fund. And that's the only thing, other than levelizing it, that's the only action that we had to change any of the components in the ECA, and that was the rate stabilization fund.
all right. Are there any other comments from the public? Please vote.
Could I ask for a roll call vote?
Oh, want to do a roll call vote? Director Mendoza?
Gotta call it, so call
Director Abadi?
Yes.
Director Menville?
No.
Director Hanks?
Yes.
Director Mendoza?
No.
Director Sanchez?
No. You. Moving on to action item 22, discussion approval of Salton City Authority and annual funding request.
I have a question on this.
Go.
Is this not an item that should have come to information first? Because it hasn't come to information? I agree with that.
Yeah, it hasn't come for information. It's up to you.
But shouldn't it come to information before we take action one way or the other on it.
Yeah, whatever.
If you want it to come for action, that is fine, but I don't think anything's
We don't,
changed.
Director Menville, we don't have an informational meeting in July.
Okay, well, then, you guys, I'm gonna vote no then.
You always vote no anyway, so what's it say?
That's why I stand good with the
Well,
Farm Bureau.
I would make a recommendation that we move it to our next regular scheduled meeting.
As action or information? Is there new information?
Right now, let's just accept it as informational and move it.
That's good enough.
Okay.
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 22.
So it's an informational item. Are there any questions for the Salton City Authority's request of $35,000?
I carried it back from the Salton, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, go
From
ahead,
the
go
Salton
ahead.
City Authority, and last year our dues were 50,000 and it has been lowered down to 35,000.
Lindsay Dale, Imperial County Farm Bureau. Of course, we're going to encourage you to oppose this, but we'll bring that up when you do decide to vote on it. I apologize for not bringing this issue up during public comment, but since it is somewhat related to Salton Sea, I thought I would take this opportunity real quick to advise the IID of a new task force that has been established called the New River Task Force. It was established under AB 1079, which is Manuel Perez's bill to fund the cleanup of the New River. IID has been requested. I believe Jose Angel talked to Mr. Ross maybe last week or so about having some type of representation on this task force. We have the Regional Board, Farm Bureau, Army Corps of Engineers. We've got a lot of different governmental agencies involved in this. We are tasked at identifying the impairments of the New River and those agencies that are doing their part to clean up the New River, such as our TMDL program, and then pairing them with funding opportunities. So since we are talking about Salton Sea, New River flows into Salton Sea, I just wanted to request that you do assign some staff or representative to serve on this task force.
Mrs. Dale, to assign a person to represent the IID and the task force, how much money is it going to cost?
It's not going to cost IID any money.
Okay.
No,
We'll
no
assign
money at all.
someone.
It's just representation. I would advise you, if I could, to participate in the impairment committee that is under this task force. We do have a meeting on Thursday. It's our first meeting. It is on a fast track, so we hope to get everything done by December. We'll be meeting every 2 weeks on Thursdays, but I can get Mr. Ross or whoever you assign the information for the meeting on Thursday. But we would love to have IID representation. I think it's very important.
I guess if a board member would like to be represent
It's not on the
IID,
agenda for action. We just,
Yeah, it's not on the agenda. I would just hope that you could.
I would say go ahead and email me. If I don't get an email, then we'll just have Mr. Ross find someone.
Is that okay? Okay, we'll send that out tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no more questions on the Salton Sea Authority annual funding request, we'll move on to 23, major work authorization regarding Monroe Substation Project.
Thank you, President Sanchez. This project here is a request from the county of Coachella. They are widening Clinton Road. The majority of our facilities are in their right-of-way, so they have prior rights, something that it's not typical for us, certainly not in the Imperial Valley, but in the Coachella Valley, we find that to happen more often. The project consists of relocating about 280 feet of existing overhead wire, relocating some poles, and then relocating some underground. The total project cost is $475,090. Of that, we're responsible for $378,590. There is a portion of it after some extensive research done by both energy and real estate. We went back as far back as Sierra Nevada records and found that a portion of that we did have prior rights, so the county is responsible for $96,500. Again, this is a project that's being done by the county of Coachella, Riverside. They're widening their road, and somewhat similar to the one I had prior, we had listened to before on Caltrans, except we're kind of on the other side of the desk here. We're having to relocate our facility since we sit on their right-of-way. This is kind of a aerial view of where the location is. This is being fast-tracked by the county of Riverside. They have already mailed us the check. We should be receiving that anytime soon. Again, this is, we went ahead and ran it through our matrix for prioritization. It really doesn't rank very high because it's really not a project that's driven by either reliability or the system, but we did want to run it through the system because it is a project that we will be working on. Again, this is...
How long's that line been there?
Pardon me?
How long's the line been there, that power line been there?
Gosh, I think that we've actually relocated it twice, but we've probably been there. Guillermo, you could probably give me an...
The first line was built in 1931.
Yeah, there's a water
1931.
code section that allows us to put power lines on city roadways or county roadways, whether we have any easements or not. The problem is if they need to be relocated, we have to pay for it.
So where are we moving it on? Are we moving on to our easement now?
No, we will be on their easement. I mean,
It will still be on their easement?
Yes, but
Even if we pay for moving it?
Yes, they're correct.
So if they want to widen it again, we're going to have to pay to move it again?
Pretty much so.
Catch-22.
I think they ought to pay for the whole thing, to tell you the truth, or whoever getting the benefit from that road widening. Just like we do down here when the mall, they pay for all that stuff. They get the benefit, we have to move stuff. Those that get the benefit pay for it.
I wish we could do that. We did look into that. They originally wanted all the money. We identified some property that we had prior rights on. And I don't know how much of our lines are under that water code section, but there are lines within city and county areas where we just put them on the road.
This Cannon Road, it runs north and south, and this line runs east and west. Is that correct?
North and south.
This line runs
Yes.
north, okay, and Cannon runs east and west.
Clinton runs north and south. I mean,
I don't think it's parallel. I think they intersect. I think it's an intersection. I was looking at a map the other day. They're parallel, so their power line is running along Cannon Road?
The power line on the west, it runs on the west side of Clinton, between Miles and Fred Waring. The east side is the part that the county is gonna be responsible. So it's north and south.
The road, the line runs north and south?
The line, yes, north and south, same as the road, Clinton Road. Miles and Fred Waring are east and west.
We found some.
Did you say part of it was underground?
There's a small portion of it that is going to be underground, with the biggest portion of it is overhead, correct? Yeah. It's just the sections that are being affected by their road widening.
Okay.
This line basically is gonna be an ultimate right-of-way according to the Riverside County plan. There is not gonna be any more expansion. But
And legally, we can't force them to pay 100% of the project?
No.
Not if we don't have right-of-way and we use the water code section to locate the line within city or county right-of-way.
The problem is here, we either have to acquire it, we've traded them ground before, quick cleaned them ground at no cost, got nothing out of it, just we didn't need it anymore. We're going to keep moving on their right-of-ways. This is going to continue to go on perpetuity.
Well, a lot of the right-of-ways we own, but there was a time when we just went and we just put the line there without asking them, without getting permission, without an encroachment permit, without having any right-of-way. We're allowed to do that under the water code, but this is the implication of doing.
Well, 50 years from now, when we're not here anymore, people are going to ask, well, there was a time we probably could have fixed this problem.
Yeah, I'm going to be here.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, well, you keep an eye. Mark my word, write it down.
I say, Abadi, you were right.
All right, do we have any more questions?
But what would it cost to acquire the rights of way?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if they would allow us.
It's a developed area. We would, as you can see, it looks to be either, is that a school, Guillermo, or a shopping? I believe that's a school, isn't it?
yeah, basically what they did is a lot of the improvement is gonna happen on the east side because on the west side it's already developed. So on the east side they have the school, so they were able to move some of the part of the street to the east side, and that's where they're gonna pay full.
So
amount.
did they use up all the space? Do you think they'll widen the road later on, or that's it?
According to their master plan, this is the ultimate width.
That's it.
And that's what we're basing that. You're correct. I mean, 50 years from now.
The west
it's hard to-
side of the road, they can't widen anymore because right on the sidewalks and people's yard. And that's where the lines are at.
Yes, because.
But why do you want to move them?
No, the lines are on the east side.
They're
They're on the
west
east side
but
and the west side.
On the west side, they're only gonna move, basically less than 5 feet, but if they wanna widen the street on both sides, then they're gonna have to buy everybody's properties there, so that's why they're going on the east side where the school parking lot is.
If I looked at the satellite photos, there's only a sidewalk and not even from here to that wall of ground. I looked at the satellite photos of everything's got to be wide, and all the widening that's going to come on the east side. That's why I can't figure out why we're moving that west line. Maybe I need to bring those pictures so everybody knows what I'm talking about when I looked at it.
It is gonna impact the west side also, but only probably 5 feet where our pole line is. But the big impact is gonna be on the east side, but still the line is on the way.
All right, do we have an action?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
First and second, please vote. Move on to approval resolution regarding letter of credit substitution with Union Bank 24.
Greg?
In May of 2007, Citibank provided the district an irrevocable letter of credit that was for a 3-year period. That expired in early May of 2010, and since then, Citibank has extended the agreement for roughly 3 months, although at our request, they reduced the amount of the letter of credit to, I think it's around $16 or $17 million. What's before you today is a substitution of that letter of credit, where we are asking for Union Bank to provide that letter of credit up to $100 million. $75 million can be used for, the max that can be used for energy is $75 million. Max can be used for water is 50, with no more than 100 at any one time. So what we're seeking authorization and approval of the following documents. Adopt the resolution approving the substitution of an irrevocable direct pay letter of credit with Union Bank N.A. Approve the reimbursement agreement and substantially the form submitted with the resolution for the commercial paper program. Approve the offering memorandum and substantially the form submitted with the resolution, and authorize officers of the district to execute agreements and take other actions as needed to establish this commercial paper program. I should note, and I'd like to put it in the minutes, that the documents that I'm talking about are behind me on the table, and if there's not enough of those available for public, we can give them, email them a copy or get them a hard copy too.
And those documents are the reimbursement agreement, the offering memorandum, and the resolution is attached to the agenda.
I move to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 documents as
I'll second
submitted
it.
to the board.
Second it.
So first and a second, please, any questions for discussion? Please vote. Schedule public rate hearings for interruptible rate and high voltage discount. Number 25.
That's yours, Greg?
Yes, that's mine also.
Okay.
We'll be getting up a slide, but I'm going to be on page 280 and 281 of the agenda. What we're asking today is the board to schedule public rate hearings in the Imperial and Coachella Valleys to receive input on the proposed interruptible rate and high voltage rate, or high voltage discount rate. We've been discussing this with the Energy Department for the past few months. We think it'll be a good marketing initiative to have an interruptible rate where some of our large customers who have backup generation can take advantage of it. As far as the high voltage discount, that would apply mainly to new customers. We currently, I think, have one customer that would qualify right now, and they're on a contract. That would be the Kayshawn Casino. They are receiving a high voltage discount. So at this point, they would be the only one who would qualify, but there could be other customers who come in to the district, and we could offer that to them. And so what we're asking today is just schedule the public hearings, one in Coachella, one in Imperial County. In the public hearing in in El Centro would be August 24, and the one in La Quinta or Coachella would be September 7th. We would, after the hearings, we would bring it back to the board for their approval on the 21st of September, with it being implemented October 1. We're also working on a time of use rate, but that will not be ready until sometime in 2011.
I move to schedule public hearing in El Centro on August the 24th, 2010, and also one at La Quinta on September 7th, 2010, each starting at 5 p.m.
Second.
Greg, how many more years, is it just one more year that Raleigh Beef has their incentive program?
I think it's 2012. We think it's 2012.
Has there been any discussion with them of, I know they don't, I don't guess they have a generator, but if they're gonna have to start paying the full ECA and everything, they might be interested.
Yes. I don't know what actions Dave's group has taken with existing customers to discuss this interruptible rate with them.
Just about every customer has asked me for a discount.
What a surprise. Big surprise.
We have about 180,000 customers ourselves who ask for a discount. Do you have any more questions for Greg on number 25? Is there a motion?
Yeah, she made it.
I
and
made a
seconded it.
motion, there's
Oh.
a motion and a second.
Please vote. And we took an item out of consent, item number 14. Approval of service agreement with IntelliBlind Technologies.
I move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for
Sit
open for
down.
discussion.
It's been discussed to death.
Please vote. All right, our next meeting is July 27th.
Well, it only matters from the point of view of attitude, you know.